Chapter 357. On the clear seaside, the sound of the waves crashing against the sand could be heard. Xia Ling and Fu Wei were escorted to the seaside, less than 20 centimeters away from the water. Su Murong's lips curled into a cruel smile. Old Xiao, tear off the tape on that little bastard's mouth. It would be a pity if she couldn't hear his screams later. She looked at the ropes on their legs and said, "Untie the ropes on your legs as well." This island was extremely desolate and there were only a few of them. Xia Ling and her son would not be able to escape from their clutches. With the ropes on their legs untied, the scene of their struggle became even more exciting. After the tape on Fu Wei's mouth was removed, the first thing he said was, "Mom, I'm sorry. It's all my fault." Xia Ling sighed. "Don't say it, Wei. I don't blame you." "No, Mom, I want to say it. I'm afraid that if I don't say it now, I won't have the chance anymore." Fu Wei's eyes were red as he choked out, "It's all my fault. In order to pay off my gambling debts, I came up with a rotten idea with my friends. I pretended to be kidnapped by them and then received the ransom. I didn't expect that they would betray me. Mom, I've implicated you. I'm really sorry." Xia Ling shook her head. Just as she was about to speak, Su Murong suddenly laughed out loud. "Fu Wei, oh Fu Wei, you really have a pig's brain. Let me tell you, this was all a trap set by me." Fu Wei's eyes widened in disbelief. After a while, he reacted. "You mean, Chang and the others were already bribed by you and deliberately instigated me to carry out this kidnapping?" Su Murong sneered. "Not only that, I also bribed your potential customers to not buy your software and forced you into a dead end. You woman, you're too despicable." Fu Wei angrily rushed toward Su Murong. Unfortunately, before he could get close to her body, he was already knocked to the ground by old Xiao. The skin on his lips was broken and fresh blood flowed out. Axie carried an iron bucket and jumped down from the cabin of the fishing boat. She placed the iron bucket on the beach and saw that there was an iron cover on top of it. It seemed like there was some ferocious animal inside as it banged against the walls of the bucket. Su Murong raised her eyebrows, her eyes cold. "Xiao, open it." Axiu nodded and carefully lifted the lid. Xia Ling and Fu Wei couldn't help but look over. There were dozens of flat fish in the iron bucket, each about 10 centimeters long. Their backs were dark green, and their bellies were bright red. It seemed that they had been cooped up in the iron bucket for too long. Once they were able to breathe fresh air, they immediately flipped over, splashing water everywhere. There were also a few fish that jumped out of the barrel and rolled back into the barrel. In those few seconds, everyone noticed that their teeth were as sharp as saws. Xia Ling and Fu Wei looked at each other. They didn't know why Su Murong had asked someone to bring a bucket of fish over. Su Murong raised her eyebrows and said calmly, "These fish are called piranhas. Their teeth are unusually sharp. It's said that they can bite off 16 cubic centimeters of meat in one bite. With this bucket of fish, you'll be reduced to bones in less than half an hour." Fu Wei trembled. His eyes filled with fear as he stared at the piranhas in the bucket. Xia Ling's eyes narrowed. If one looked closely, they would notice that her gaze was calm and rational. It was completely different from the gaze of a loving mother who was worried about her son. However, Su Murong didn't notice any of this. She was still gloating over the piranhas. "I specially prepared this for you and your son. Once you've become a pile of bones and rot in this desolate place, no one will ever find you." She glanced at Old Owl and a Meng and ordered, "Pour the piranhas into the sea, then throw them both in." Old Owl nodded. He lifted the metal bucket and took 2 steps back, away from the water. Then he slowly tipped the bucket and poured all the piranhas into the water. After the piranhas entered the water, they didn't swim away immediately. Instead, they circled around in the shallow water, as if waiting for something. Old Owl was prepared. He took out a dagger and cut his finger. He squeezed 2 drops of blood onto the water. The smell of blood spread in the water. The piranhas seemed to have gone crazy. They rolled, flopped, and hissed at each other. He did this to lure the piranhas to stay where they were with his blood. "All right, it's your turn now." Meng carried Xia Ling with one hand and grabbed Fu Wei with the other. He pushed them into the water. Fu Wei shouted, "Hold on." Su Murong made a gesture and Meng paused. Su Murong said coldly, "Do you have any last words?" Fu Wei said anxiously, "Let my mother go." Su Murong crossed her arms and said calmly, "Impossible. Meng, continue." Meng lifted Xia Ling first and pushed her into the water. Seeing that her body was getting closer and closer to the water, the piranhas seemed to have smelled the scent of humans. They turned restlessly and a few fish jumped out of the water. They opened their mouths and bit her cheeks with their sharp teeth. "No!" Fu Wei screamed. He was so scared that he almost fell to the ground. His legs trembled as he shouted, "Please, let my mother go." In the blink of an eye, Xia Ling threw her head back and slammed it into Meng's nose. Her wrists tightened and the rope broke with a bang. She quickly grabbed Meng's hand that was on her shoulder and threw him over her shoulder into the sea. All of this happened too quickly. It only took a few seconds. When old Xiao and Xiao reacted and wanted to help Meng, the school of piranhas had already bitten his body. Meng's shrill screams filled the air. Once the piranhas had their prey, they would not let go even if they were beaten to death. They would move their bodies to tear the bloody flesh off and change their teeth so that they could continue to hunt for food. Their strong teeth immediately caused a very serious bite. Pieces of bloody flesh were torn from Meng's legs and body. Blood stained the water red. "Help!" Meng flopped in the water and screamed miserably. Old Xiao and Xiao each stood on one side and grabbed his arm. They pulled him out of the water. There were dozens of piranhas biting his flesh tightly, unwilling to let go. His clothes were torn to shreds and his legs were badly mangled, revealing his white bones. Just as they were trying to save Meng, Xia Ling had already dragged Fu Wei, whose legs had turned to jelly, to a place far away from the water. She quickly untied the rope around his wrists. Su Murong glared at them angrily. "You're not Xia Ling. Or you?" That's right, this woman was not Xia Ling. Xia Ling could not be so skilled. It was even more impossible for her right leg to recover in an instant and pull Fu Wei along for dozens of meters. Old Xiao and Xiao were still helping Meng deal with the piranhas. A helicopter rumbled as it flew into everyone's line of sight. The sniper on the helicopter carried a submachine gun and aimed at Su Murong and the others. There was also a speedboat cutting across the calm sea and rushing over. There was also a sniper on the speedboat aiming at them with a submachine gun. Their rescue team had arrived. Xia Ling, oh no, it should be Leng Shui who was pretending to be Xia Ling. She calmly stroked her hair and said calmly, "You don't deserve to know my name." "Damn it, I've been fooled." Su Murong quickly took out a pistol from her handbag and aimed at Leng Shui and Fu Wei. "Get the helicopter and speedboat to leave. Otherwise, I'll take your lives immediately." On the other side, old Xiao and Xiao had already abandoned Meng. They each took out a pistol from their arms and aimed at Leng Shui and Leng Shui. After the extreme panic, Fu Wei had experienced a bizarre role change. His mind was still in a mess and he did not know what to do. He only knew to follow closely behind Leng Shui. Leng Shui pulled him behind her and stared at Su Murong. She said coldly, "Su Murong, you're at the end of your rope. I advise you to put down your weapon and surrender. Don't even think about it." "Old Xiao, Xiao, quick, shoot and kill them." Su Murong screamed and pulled the trigger at the same time. Bang bang. After a few gunshots, old Xiao and Xiao fell to the ground. They were shot from the back by the snipers on the speedboat. The pistol in Su Murong's hand was knocked out of her hand by the snipers on the helicopter. The helicopter landed on the beach with a loud roar. The people on the speedboat also quickly jumped onto the beach. They were actually a group of policemen in uniform. In just a few seconds, Su Murong was already subdued by the police and handcuffed. She was like a defeated rooster, losing all her arrogance. Old Xiao and Xiao had already been shot dead. They lay on the beach with blood gushing out and did not move at all. Although the piranha on Meng's body had been dealt with, a lot of its flesh and blood had been devoured. White bones could be seen in many parts of its body and it had already fainted. Bailey Han was the first to jump down from the helicopter. He then helped the real Xia Ling and Fu Qinghai down. "Dad, Mom," Fu Wei was so guilty that he quickly threw himself into their arms and burst into tears. Dad, Mom, I was wrong. I won't mess around anymore. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Xia Ling and her husband hugged Fu Wei and could not help but wipe their tears. Leng Shui walked up to Bailey Han, took out a recording pen from her pocket and said, "Young master, this is the recording of Su Murong's confession." "Very good. Thank you for your hard work." Bailey Han took the recording pen. Officer Li, who was leading the team, ordered his subordinates to take Su Murong onto the speedboat. Then he ordered a bomb to be dropped in the shallow water where the piranha were. All the piranha were killed by the explosion to prevent them from destroying the ecological balance of the water. Before Officer Li left, he greeted Bailey Han. Bailey Han gave him the recording pen to use as evidence against Su Murong. Xia Ling and her husband thanked Leng Shui profusely for saving their son's life. Leng Shui smiled and said, "You're welcome. This is my job." Ad. Hongcha 866. Chapter 358. It turned out that when Snake Boy called Xia Ling to inform her of the address to deliver the ransom, his phone signal was tracked by Bailey Han's men. Bao chased him downstairs and found him suspicious. He followed him all the way and eavesdropped on his conversation with Monkey. He learned that there was another mastermind behind the kidnapping. On the other side, Bailey Han asked Leng Shui to disguise herself as Xia Ling and deliver the ransom on her behalf. Leng Shui pretended to cooperate with the kidnappers and hid a tracking device in her shoes. While tracking Leng Shui's coordinates, Bailey Han asked the police for help to bring the mastermind behind the kidnapping to justice. As for Monkey and the other two, they could not escape the punishment of the law. This was a battle that was won beautifully. After this incident, Fu Wei realized that people in the underworld were sinister. On the surface, people called him brothers, but in reality, they would not hesitate to betray him for their own benefits. He completely cut off contact with his bad friends and decided to turn over a new leaf. That night, the family celebrated at Xia Ling's house. As Fu Wei's savior, Leng Shui was also invited. It was not the first time that she had eaten with Xia Dong's family, but this time she felt a little uncomfortable because everyone treated her as a hero and was extremely enthusiastic about her. Fu Wei even solemnly toasted her to thank her for saving his life. After that, he toasted Bailey Han and Xia Dong. He raised his glass with both hands and said sincerely, "Sister, brother-in-law, the people I want to thank the most are you two. When I was at my worst, you didn't abandon me. You introduced me to jobs and helped me change my image. This time, you even saved my life. I swear, I will be a good person in the future and will not let you down." Xia Dong was so happy and excited that she momentarily forgot that she couldn't drink. Just as she raised her wine glass, Bailey Han had already pressed down on her hand. He smiled and said, "Ah Wei, we are all very happy that you can understand. Your sister can't drink, so I will drink on her behalf." He raised his head and drank the wine in his glass. Then he raised Xia Dong's glass and slowly drank it. Xia Dong quickly picked up some food with her chopsticks and fed it to him. In the end, Fu Wei poured a drink for Fu Qinghai and Xia Ling. Before he said anything, his eyes were already filled with tears. Seeing the tenderness in his parents' eyes, his heart was filled with guilt. "Dad, Mom, your son is unfilial. I have made you worry for so many years. I am really sorry. I will not do anything stupid in the future. I will not let you down." Fu Qinghai and Xia Ling were also teary-eyed. They thought that they would not see the day their son became sensible. They did not expect him to wake up. They were so excited that they kept praising him. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the whole family was joyous and harmonious. Fu Wei looked around at his family members. His eyes flickered as if he had something to say but was too embarrassed to say it. Bailey Han's eyes were sharp and he was the first to notice his abnormality. The corners of his lips curled up as he said, "Ah Wei, do you have something to say to us?" Fu Wei coughed and blushed. "Brother-in-law, I have an idea that I want to discuss with you." "Okay, go ahead." Bailey Han's expression was gentle. He moved his lips and clenched his fists. He made up his mind and said, "Dad, Mom, sis, brother-in-law, I want to go back to school." He lowered his head uneasily. He did not dare to look at everyone's expression. Bailey Han sat next to him. He reached out and patted him on the shoulder. "This is a good thing. As long as you make up your mind, we will support you." Fu Wei suddenly looked up. He looked around in disbelief and found that his family was looking at him with smiles. Obviously, they agreed with his suggestion. Fu Chenghai said happily, "Wei, don't worry and go back to school. Your mom and I still have some savings. It is enough to pay off our gambling debts." Fu Wei said seriously, "Dad, Mom, thank you for supporting me. However, I want to pay off my gambling debts myself. I want to work for the next 2 months and use my own hands to make up for the mess I made." "Good. As expected of my son. You have learned how to be responsible. Very good." Fu Chenghai was so excited that he could not control himself. The whole family was immersed in high spirits. On the other side, the Su family was shrouded in a gloomy fog. Su Xingchen could not believe that her mother was arrested. Since she was young, her mother was like a goddess in her eyes. She was so perfect that no one could blaspheme her. How could she fall into the hands of Bailey Han and be arrested by the police? She was angry and could not believe it. She vented all her anger on the items in the room. She broke the computer, smashed the mirror and vase, and roared loudly. Xia Zhenxing still didn't know that Su Xingchen wasn't his biological daughter. Although he had many complaints towards his wife, toward Su Xingchen he still doted on her like a loving father. When she was angry, he clearly knew that he would be scolded by her, but he still walked into her room. The room was a mess. Su Xingchen was like a crazy woman. Her hair was disheveled. She held her head with both hands and screamed. Xia Zhenxing approached her and said softly, "Xingchen, don't be like this. I don't want you to care." Before he could finish his words, Su Xingchen suddenly pushed him away. She stared at him with resentment. "It's all your fault. You're too useless. If it was my godfather, he would definitely think of a way to save mommy. How could I have a father like you?" Her words were like a sharp knife, ruthlessly stabbing into Xia Zhenxing's heart. Blood flowed out. His face was pale, like a fallen leaf in the autumn wind, lonely and miserable. His expression was sluggish. His body was stiff for nearly a minute. Finally, he comforted himself. His daughter only suffered a blow and was emotionally unstable. He should not be so calculative. His lips moved with difficulty and said, "Xingchen, I will hire the best lawyer for your mommy. Now, you should eat something first. Don't starve." "I'm not hungry. Get out. I don't want to talk to you." Su Xingchen pointed at the door and hysterically shouted, "A useless man like you is not fit to be my father." Xia Zhenxing's legs felt like they were filled with lead. He held his heart that was full of holes and walked out of her room step by step. Everything happened too suddenly. Other than knowing that Su Murong was suspected of kidnapping Fu Wei and was charged with intentional homicide, he did not know the details of the situation. He slumped against the back of the sofa and held his forehead with one hand. In an instant he looked like he had aged 10 years. The next day, Xia Zhenxing went to the detention center. He wanted to meet with Su Murong, but Su Murong refused to meet with him. Later, he went to the police station and requested to meet with Captain Li, who arrested Su Murong. He tried to get more details of the case from him. Captain Li did not hide anything. He roughly described the situation. In the end, he vaguely mentioned the contents of the recording pen, including Su Murong's order to set the fire and her pregnancy before marriage. Finally, he said, although we have concrete evidence, Su Murong did not plead guilty. Xia Zhenxing could no longer hear what he said in the end. His mind was filled with thoughts of Su Murong setting the fire and the fact that Su Xingchen was not his biological daughter. He did not know how he walked out of the police station. His head was heavy and his feet were light. His ears were filled with ear-piercing mocking laughter. He was like a walking corpse. Unknowingly, he walked to the road. A car roared and sped over. A hand pulled him over. "Uncle? Are you okay? Old man, do you want to die?" He could not hear the concerned questions of the passers-by and the angry curses of the driver. His vision turned black and his legs gave way. He fell to the ground with a plop. It was already late at night. Xia Ling did not expect to be woken up by Xia Zhenxing's call at this time. His voice sounded tired and weary. Aling, I'm very sorry. I didn't know Su Murong had done so many terrible things. Xia Ling looked at her husband who was sleeping soundly beside her. She got up from the bed and walked to the living room. You already know? Xia Zhenxing suddenly burst into tears. He said intermittently, I know everything. She was the one who set the fire. Aling, Xingchen is not my daughter. Tell me, why am I so stupid? I'm so useless. Yesterday, when they returned from the deserted island, Leng Shui had already told them everything about how she had induced Su Murong to confess to the crime. Therefore, Xia Ling already knew that Xia Zhenxing was not lying. It was indeed Su Murong who had forced him to marry her. The hatred in her heart for Xia Zhenxing dissipated a little. Hearing how sad he was, Xia Ling felt a little conflicted. She hesitated for a moment and said, It's not that you're useless. It's just that Su Murong is too cunning. I'm sorry. I've let you and Xia Xia down. I've failed my whole life. Aling, if there's an afterlife, I want to be your husband again. I will never betray you again. I want to be with you for the rest of my life and grow old together. Xia Zhenxing's heart-wrenching cries traveled to Xia Ling's ears through the phone. She suddenly panicked as if something bad was about to happen. She asked anxiously, Xia Zhenxing, where are you right now? On the roof of the hospital. Aling, help me tell Xia Xia that I'm not a good father. I've let her down. Xia Ling's pupils shrank. Her face was filled with horror. Even her voice changed. What are you doing on the roof of the hospital? Don't do anything stupid. He began to sob again. I don't have the face to live anymore. Aling, I'll find you in my next life. Xia Zhenxing, Xia Ling shouted. You haven't paid back what you owe me and Xia Xia. Don't you think it's too easy for you to die now? I know. That's why I'll pay you back in my next life. Shut up. You've already harmed us for our entire lives. Do you want to harm us in our next lives? If you're really sorry, come to my house right now and beg for my forgiveness. I can't do it, Aling. Let's meet again in our next lives. Attention, Xinwu 799. Chapter 359. Xia Zhenxing's voice was filled with despair and disgust for this world. Xia Ling wanted to rush to his side immediately to stop him from committing suicide. She yelled anxiously and painfully, Xia Zhenxing, I'm begging you. Don't do anything stupid. Do you know why I survived when I was so badly burned? It was because I had faith in myself. I was worried about Xia Xia. You've only suffered a small blow now. Why don't you turn around and look? Xia Xia and I are still here. Her voice was choked with sobs. She gritted her teeth and said clearly, Xia Zhenxing, I forgive you. I really forgive you. Xia Xia has forgiven you too. Don't be impulsive and don't do anything stupid. Let Xia Xia call you dad again, okay? The person on the other end of the phone did not make a sound. Only the sound of suppressed sobs could be heard. Xia Ling softened her voice and said, Zhenxing, our family has been separated for too long. Let's sit together and untie each other. No matter what happened in the past, we will always be a family. The sobs on the other end of the phone turned into loud cries. The sound of heartbreak made Xia Ling's tears fall like rain. She choked and said, Zhenxing, actually, when I found out the truth, I didn't hate you anymore. You know, I'm just a softy at heart. I couldn't bring myself to tell you. Actually, I'm very grateful to you. You sacrificed a lot to protect Xia Xia and me. Zhenxing, even if the whole world abandoned you, even if the whole world let you down, you still have Xia Xia and me. Although I'm no longer your wife, I'm still your family. Do you have the heart to abandon us again? Do you have the heart to abandon your cute little grandson? The sobs gradually subsided and his emotions seemed to have stabilized. Xia Ling asked softly, Zhenxing, which hospital are you in now? I want to see you. Xia Zhenxing was silent for a long time. Central Hospital. Okay, wait for me there. I'll be right there. When Xia Ling ended the call, she realized that Fu Qinghai had already woken up and was standing at the door of the living room. She quickly explained, Old Fu, it was Xia Zhenxing who called. I was afraid that he would do something stupid, so, I understand, you don't have to explain. Fu Qinghai walked towards her, his expression as usual, not revealing the slightest bit of displeasure. "Do you want me to accompany you?" Xia Ling thought for a moment and said, "No need, I'll go alone. He's just calmed down and I'm afraid I'll agitate him." Fu Qinghai said, "I'd better go with you. It's so late and I'm worried. I'll wait downstairs later. You can go up and meet him." Xia Ling did not refuse. The couple took the elevator and went downstairs. It was not easy for them to hail a taxi. The couple got into the car and Xia Ling said gratefully, "Old Fu, thank you." Fu Qinghai grinned. "We've been married for so long, what's the point of saying so much?" The two rushed to the hospital. Fu Qinghai was waiting in the hospital lobby while Xia Ling took the elevator upstairs alone. When she reached the top floor of the hospital, it was pitch black and nothing could be seen. Xia Ling took out her phone and used the weak light to illuminate the area. She looked around for traces of Xia Zhenxing. Finally, she saw a figure near the railing. She called his name and walked in his direction. When she got closer, she realized that Xia Zhenxing was sitting on the ground with his hands hugging his knees. His head was buried in his legs and he reeked of alcohol. There were a few empty beer cans beside him. "Zhenxing." Xia Ling bent down and pushed his shoulder. He remained in that position, motionless. Xia Ling pushed him hard. "Zhenxing, wake up. Don't sleep here, you'll get sick." This time, it worked. He moved his body and slowly raised his head. His eyes were hazy as he looked at the woman squatting in front of him. He called out in a muffled voice, "Ah Ling." "It's me." He suddenly pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. "Ah Ling, I missed you so much. I missed you so much." He murmured. "Don't be like this. Zhenxing, let go of me." Xia Ling was embarrassed. Fortunately, it was night and Fu Qinghai did not follow her upstairs. Otherwise, she would have been embarrassed. "Ah Ling, I missed you." He was strangely strong. He hugged her so tightly that she could not break free. Xia Ling was angry and anxious. She said in a heavier tone, "Zhenxing, don't be like this. Let go of me. If you don't, I'll be angry." Don't be angry, don't be angry." He murmured and let go of her. He sobbed softly. "Ah Ling, don't be angry." Xia Ling sighed and coaxed him like she was coaxing a child. Okay, I'm not angry anymore. Get up quickly. I'll take you back to the ward." She noticed that he was wearing a hospital gown. This time, he didn't mess around and slowly stood up with her help. A drunk person and a person with weak legs made it difficult for the two of them to move. When she helped him to the door of the corridor, Xia Ling was so tired that she was panting. She looked at the stairs in front of her. If he accidentally fell, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, she decided to call Fu Qinghai up to help. When he received Xia Ling's call, Fu Qinghai did not say anything and hurried upstairs to help her. Fu Qinghai helped Xia Zhenxing down the stairs. When they reached the elevator, Xia Ling asked the drunk Xia Zhenxing, "Zhenxing, which ward are you in?" Xia Zhenxing said in a muffled voice, "Ward 703. After the couple sent him back to the ward, they were worried that he would run up to the roof again. After some discussion, Fu Qinghai stayed behind to take care of him while Xia Ling stayed in a hotel near the hospital for the night. Xia Zhenxing slept until 8 in the morning. When he opened his eyes, he stared blankly at the white ceiling. After thinking for a long time, he remembered that he seemed to have fainted on the side of the road yesterday and was sent to the hospital by a kind person. Then he climbed up to the top floor and drank a lot. He gave Xia Ling a call. Because of the hangover, his head still hurt a little. He rubbed his forehead and sat up in bed, still a little confused as to why he was lying on a hospital bed. The door to the ward opened. He instinctively turned his head to look and was instantly stunned. What did he see? Standing at the door was Xia Dong. She ran to his bedside and threw herself into his arms with tears streaming down her face. Dad, I'm sorry. Xia Zhenxing could not believe his eyes. He mumbled, "Am I dreaming? Are you really Xia?" Xia Dong cried even harder. "Dad, it's really me. I've wronged you. Don't leave me and Mom." Early in the morning, her mother had called her and told her that her father had almost jumped off a building to commit suicide. She was so anxious that she rushed to the hospital as fast as she could. On the way to the hospital, She kept blaming herself. If she had taken the initiative to contact her father when she found out the truth and told him her true thoughts, perhaps he would not have tried to commit suicide. Xia Zhensheng's tears streamed down his face. He hugged her tightly in his arms and choked out, Xia, are you willing to forgive me? Xia Dong said with tears streaming down her face, Dad, I've forgiven you a long time ago. I know that it's all Su Murong's fault. You sacrificed a lot to protect Mom and me. Dad, I'm so ashamed. I shouldn't have treated you like that in the past. Are you willing to forgive me for being immature? Xia Zhensheng stroked her hair and whispered, Silly girl, Dad has never blamed you, Dad. This affectionate call made Xia Zhensheng's tears fall like rain. He had waited for more than 20 years. Finally, he could be reunited with his daughter. After they had calmed down, Bailey Han and Xia Ling, who had been waiting outside, entered the ward. The knot in his heart for more than 20 years was finally untied. Xia Zhensheng also had the courage to live on. His body was fine and he was soon discharged from the hospital. After he was discharged, the first thing he did was to submit the divorce agreement to Su Murong through his lawyer. As for Su Xingshan, after all, he had raised him for more than 20 years. He still had feelings for him. However, after Su Xingshan found out the truth, he did not want to acknowledge him as his father. He did not force him and packed his belongings. He did not take a single cent from the Su family and moved out of the Su family's villa. The Academy of Fine Arts had once assigned him a staff dormitory. He lived there temporarily and planned to find a more suitable house before moving. After Bailey Han found out about this, he bought a comfortable and well-furnished apartment near the school and asked Xia Dong to send him the key. Without Su Murong's interference, Fu Wei quickly closed his first business deal with unyielding perseverance. He became more and more mature, more and more modest. He gained the approval of the leaders and customers, and his work became more and more smooth. Bailey Han hired the best lawyer and vowed to fight Su Murong to the end. He wanted her to pay for what she had done. After the first trial, Su Murong was convicted of intentional injury, intentional homicide, kidnapping, and several other crimes. She was sentenced to life imprisonment. Su Murong did not agree with the first trial's verdict and filed an appeal. Because the Su Murong's family was very famous in a city, the case of Su Murong attracted widespread attention from the whole society. There was also one person who had been paying attention to the trial's result. He was Shen Ran, Su Murong's agent. When he learned that Su Murong had offended Bailey Han and that she was about to collapse, Shen Ran set off fireworks at the seaside for an hour to celebrate. Before the second trial began, Bailey Han received a strange phone call. Mr. Bailey, my name is Shen Ran. You don't know me, but I know you. I'm very grateful to you for bringing down Su Murong. In order to express my gratitude, I specially want to give you a gift. Shen Ran paused and said, Fenglin Villa is Su Murong's villa in the suburbs. You will find something very interesting there. Bailey Han's eyes moved slightly and he said lightly, Why should I believe you? Shen Ran sneered, As long as you go to that place, you will understand. Believe me. Don't go alone, because that place is full of bodyguards and traps. Bailey Han said calmly, Condition? He never believed that there was a free lunch in this world. Beauty novel, Hongcha 866. Chapter 360. Shen Ran chuckled. You're indeed a smart person. My only condition is that Su Murong is sentenced to death. A vicious woman like her shouldn't be allowed to pollute the air anymore. Bailey Han said calmly, Deal? Bailey Han was dubious about Shen Ran's words. He wouldn't easily believe a stranger's words. He had sent Ah Bao and Ah Hu to Maplewood's villa to gather information. Both of them were the best fighters in the Dragon Gang, but he didn't expect them to return with injuries. Ah Bao's arm was injured, and his black suit was stained with blood. Ah Hu's calf was fractured. According to them, there were at least 10 bodyguards in the villa. After they sneaked into the villa, they avoided the bodyguards' line of sight and split up. Ah Bao found the location of the basement and planned to enter to investigate, while Ah Hu searched the rooms above ground. In the end, before Ah Bao could enter the basement, he was discovered by the Tibetan Mastiff guarding the door. The ferocious Tibetan Mastiff pounced on him and scratched his arm. Ahu also accidentally triggered the alarm and attracted the bodyguard's attention. During the fight, he fractured his calf. The two of them lowered their heads in shame and said, "Young master, we failed to complete the mission. Please punish us." Bailey Han's expression was calm. "Although you didn't complete the mission, you managed to gather important information. Go back and recuperate." "Thank you, young master." The two of them left after they finished speaking. Bailey Han's slender fingers tapped lightly on the table. He concluded that there must be some unspeakable secret hidden in Maplewood's villa. Otherwise, Su Murong wouldn't be so cautious. She would go to jail and still let the bodyguards guard the villa. Xia Dong walked into the study with a cup of hot tea. Seeing him deep in thought, she didn't disturb him and gently placed the teacup on the table. He pulled her into his arms and wrapped his arms around her waist. His chin rested on her neck. She rubbed against his chest and said softly, "Hubby, what were you thinking about just now?" Bailey Han hugged her tightly and said in a low voice, "Ahu and Abeo came back with some minor injuries. I'm sure that Maplewood's villa is hiding an unspeakable secret." Xia Dong thought for a moment and said, "Ahu and Abeo are so powerful, yet they are injured. It seems that Maplewood's villa is really a dangerous place. Why don't we leave this matter to the police?" Bailey Han shook his head. "The police don't have a search warrant. They can't break into private houses without permission." Xia Dong laughed. "Then wouldn't it be a crime for you to break in?" He raised his eyebrows and said, "Honey, since Su Murong has hidden something in there, I'm sure she won't dare to make a fuss even if it's invaded. As long as no one dies, I have a way to make it public without anyone noticing that I'm the one who did it." "All right, it seems that I can't change your mind." She hooked her arms around his neck and looked at him with sparkling eyes. "But you have to promise me that you won't take any risks." "Absolutely not. I already have a plan." He lowered his head and pecked her seductive red lips. She licked the corner of his lips playfully. "Plan." He bit her earlobe and said a few words softly. "Hubby, you're a genius." She laughed softly and kissed him on the lips as a reward. Although Ahu and Abeo had failed to gather information, they had drawn a map of the villa's rooms and marked out the locations of some of the hidden mechanisms. Since the bodyguards were guarding the villa and didn't allow anyone to break in, he would find a way to force them out. 2 days later, late at night, Bailey Han sent out 3 elites from the Dragon Gang to carry out a mission. These 3 people were Old Wu, Crow, and Gang Z. Crow used special equipment to interfere with the surveillance equipment outside the villa, allowing his companions to successfully sneak into the villa. After that, they set a fire in the villa's kitchen, which triggered the fire alarm and alerted all the bodyguards. While they were trying to put out the fire, the garage and warehouse caught fire again. Another group of people were sent to put out the fire. Now was the time when the security was at its weakest. Crow stayed outside the villa to keep a lookout while the other 2 entered the basement with tranquilizer guns. The Tibetan Mastiff that had attacked Abeo was put down by more than 10 tranquilizer guns as soon as it got up. After passing by the sturdy Tibetan Mastiff, the 2 encountered another guard, who was also put down by them with tranquilizer guns. They walked step by step to the deepest part of the basement. This place was like a prison, and the air was filled with an unpleasant smell. There were 5 secret rooms in the corridor, and each room had a thick and heavy iron door. There was a big iron lock on the door, and there was a very small vent above the iron door, which was only big enough to fit a fist in. Through the vent, they saw a scene that they would never forget. Even though they were used to seeing life and death and torture, they were still shocked by the scene in the secret room. After a brief moment of shock, the 2 immediately took out their cameras and took pictures of what was in the secret room. Old Wu quickly reported the situation to Bailey Han. "Young master, there are 4 men imprisoned in the basement. What should we do now?" Bailey Han frowned slightly. If Old Wu and the others left now, when the bodyguards found out that the secret of the basement had been exposed, they would very likely kill the 4 men in the basement to cover up the crime. The thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately made a decision. "Save them." Old Wu said in a low voice, "There is a large iron lock on the iron door, and we haven't found the key yet. More importantly, the 4 men have lost their ability to move. It will be difficult for us to get out with them. Bailey Han frowned. When will the fire alarm arrive? Before we entered the villa, we already called the fire alarm. They should be here soon. Then we'll follow the original plan and delay until the fire alarm arrives. Then we'll lead them to discover the secret of the secret room. This was Bailey Han's plan. He deliberately set the villa on fire to divert the bodyguard's attention, and the 3 members of the Dragon Gang would take the opportunity to discover the secret of the basement. Then, they would lead the fire alarm to discover the secret and completely separate themselves from the matter. After ending the call, Old Wu said to his companion, "Gangzi, you stay here and protect the 4 of them. I'll go upstairs and check out the situation." Before Old Wu had time to return to the ground, Crow, who had stayed outside as a lookout, had already sent a message through the earpiece communicator. "Old Wu, the fire alarm is here. They're helping to put out the fire." Old Wu frowned slightly and immediately had a plan in mind. He quickly informed Gangzi to remove the anesthetic needles from the Tibetan Mastiff and the guards and withdraw from the secret room. As for himself, he pulled out his pistol and fired a shot into the sky. He shouted, "Murder!" The fire outside was almost extinguished. When the firemen heard the gunshots and cries for help, they divided some of their forces into the villa to investigate. The leader of the group of bodyguards quickly stopped them. "Officer, there's nothing in the villa. You don't have to go in." The captain said, "I clearly heard gunshots and cries for help just now. Something must have happened." Xiao Ding, quickly inform 110. The firemen did not have guns on them. In the event of a shooting incident, they still had to ask the police for help. "Save me! Save me!" The cries for help became more and more urgent. The fire chief ignored the bodyguard's attempts to stop him and directly led 2 firemen directly into the villa. The villa was quiet and there was not a single person in sight. The firemen's hearts were in their throats because they did not have guns or bulletproof vests. They had no choice but to carefully investigate the situation. "Captain, there's blood here." A fireman pointed at the blood on the floor. "Follow me." The 3 of them followed the blood and walked down the corridor to the basement. At the entrance of the basement, they saw the unconscious Tibetan Mastiff lying on the ground and a bodyguard in a black suit. There were a few wounds on the bodyguard's fingers and the blood had already coagulated. The blood on the floor disappeared all the way here. It seemed that the blood had flowed from his fingers. "Let's go inside and take a look." The captain continued to walk inside with the 2 firemen. Soon they found 5 secret rooms. Through the narrow vent, they could clearly see the scene inside the secret room. The 3 firemen were shocked at the same time. In each secret room, there was a single bed, a toilet, and a simple sink. 4 of the secret rooms had a man imprisoned in them, and the remaining secret room was empty. A man was lying naked on the dirty bed. He seemed to be paralyzed on the bed and had lost the ability to move. He ate, drank, and defecated on the bed. Next to his head, there was a bowl of rice. He could reach it as long as he stretched out his hand. His lower body was soaked in feces and urine. He did not know how long it had been since he cleaned it, so the skin below his waist had all begun to rot and maggots had even grown out. In the second secret room, the imprisoned man had lost both of his legs. From the knees to the soles of his feet, they were all cut off. His wrists were firmly tied to the head of the bed with iron chains. His long hair was like withered grass over his shoulders and his beard had grown to his chest. It seemed that he had not washed for many years. It was impossible to see his original appearance. In the third secret room, the imprisoned man was like a wild dog. There was an iron chain around his neck. He squatted on the ground naked. His hands were on the ground as he barked at the empty room. He seemed to have forgotten that he was a human. Even when he peed, he lifted one of his legs and washed the bedpost with a warm current. On the floor, his feces were everywhere. In the fourth secret room, the man looked much more normal than the other 3. He was wearing a white robe and his face was clean. It was the face of an extremely beautiful young man. He sat cross-legged on the ground and hugged something white in his hands. However, when the firefighters saw what he was hugging, all the hair on their bodies stood on end. That round thing was actually a human skull. The skull's eye sockets and nose were hollow. Its mouth was clean and beautiful. The young man treated the skull as if it was his lover. He carefully wiped the skull and softly hummed a folk song. This scene was like the perfect combination of evil and innocence. It made one's hair stand on end. Soon, the police rushed over. Not only that, even the reporters rushed over after hearing the news. However, the police did not know how they got the news. In fact, it was old Wu who, under Bailey Han's instructions, secretly took photos of the secret room and sent them to all the major newspapers and media outlets. When the police carried out the 4 men imprisoned in the secret room on stretchers, the reporters rushed over like crazy. They did not care about the pungent stench and kept pressing the shutters of their cameras. They fought to be the first to report on this shocking illegal detention. The next morning, Xiaodong also saw the reports and the hair-raising pictures. The disgusting and cruel pictures almost made her vomit. She endured the great discomfort and looked at all the pictures. Finally, her gaze fell on the last picture. It was a picture of a young man hugging a skull. The young man had an extremely beautiful face. Because he had not seen the sun for many years, his skin was abnormally white. His shoulder-length hair was softly draped over his shoulders, outlining his feminine beauty. His eyebrows looked somewhat familiar. Xiaodong stared at the picture for a long time. Suddenly, her body trembled and her pupils shrank. She ran to the phone in a panic and pressed a familiar number with her trembling fingers. As soon as the other party picked up, she shouted excitedly, "Brother Shin, I saw an..." Mika Kito was on a business trip in Japan and was in the middle of a meeting with her subordinates. When she heard this, she suddenly stood up and said with a trembling voice, "Where is he? Is he still alive?" Xiaodong nodded repeatedly. She cried and laughed at the same time. "He's alive, he's still alive. But his situation is not very good. It turns out that he was imprisoned by Su Murong." What? A storm suddenly swept through Mika Kito's eyes. Her entire body released a cold and murderous aura. Everyone in the meeting room was enveloped by this cold aura and did not even dare to breathe loudly. Xiaodong hurriedly said, "Brother Shin, don't be so agitated. I don't know the specific situation now. I'll call you when I know more." "I'll go back immediately." Mika Kito was eager to return home when there was suddenly news of her brother, who had been missing for more than 20 years. She was not in the mood to care about the gang's affairs. She handed over all the affairs to Jiang Dao and let him handle them. He rushed to a city with Suzuku and Lu Xing. That day, Xiaodong went to the police station accompanied by Bailey Han and learned the details. It turned out that the 4 men, including a Yuan, were imprisoned in the basement by Su Murong. The longest of them had been imprisoned for 15 years and had completely lost the ability to communicate with the outside world. The identities of the 4 men were still under investigation. The police had compared them with the missing persons in recent years, but they had not found their real names or relevant information. She couldn't get any information about the 4 people from Su Murong's bodyguards. Xiaodong stated the purpose of her visit. "Officer, this man is someone I know." She took out a Yuan's photo and pointed it to the police. "His name is Hiroshi Kitado. His mother is Chinese and his father is Japanese. He also has an older brother named Mika Kito. May I ask if we can meet him now?" Beauty novel, Hongcha 866. Chapter 361. The police officer in charge of the reception had already been instructed by the chief to fulfill all of Bailey Han and his wife's requests unconditionally. Therefore, he led them to the sanatorium where Hiroshi Kitado was temporarily staying. According to his introduction, the other 3 men were also staying in the sanatorium. The nurse at the sanatorium said to them, "After our examination, we found that the patient has many old scars on his body. He has been abused in the past. His mental state is not very good. He is in a self-enclosed world and refuses to communicate with the outside world." The doctors, nurses, and police all tried to communicate with Hiroshi Kitado, but they all failed. This was a room facing the sun. White curtains hung above the large windows. Half of the curtains covered the window, while the other half was open. Warm sunlight shone through the glass and poured onto the young man sitting on the floor. He was actually 28 years old, But the long period of imprisonment made him look like he was only 18 years old. He sat facing the window, his whole body bathed in the sunlight. His shoulder-length hair had been cut neatly, and his jet-black hair shone with a healthy luster under the sunlight. He was still holding the skull in his arms. His eyes were clear, but his expression was absent-minded. He was murmuring something, but unfortunately, no one could understand him. Xia Dong squatted in front of him. Looking at him like this, her heart ached. She still remembered that more than 10 years ago, her mother had died in a fire and she had been sent to Chensi orphanage. At that time, the first friend she had made in the orphanage was Hiroshi Kitado. However, at that time, he was not Hiroshi Kitado. He had taken his mother's surname, Liang Yuan. Hiroshi Kitado and Mika Kito had similar facial features. Therefore, 6 years ago, when Xia Dong first met Mika Kito in Bali, she felt that he looked familiar. Ayuan. Xia Dong hesitated for a long time before she finally called out his name. Do you still remember me? I'm Xia. Hiroshi Kitado did not look at her. All his attention was on the skull in his arms. His fair and slender fingers slowly rubbed the skull as he murmured. Her nose twitched and tears almost fell from her eyes. He was still immersed in his own world, ignoring everything that was happening around him. The group of people stood on the lawn downstairs and looked at Hiroshi Kitado through the window. Xia Dong asked, "Why is Ayuan still holding that thing?" The nurse explained, "We tried to take the skull from him, but he was very agitated. He kicked and hit the medical staff. We had no choice but to let him keep it for the time being." The police officer's assistant to Xia Dong and the rest of the police said, "We suspected that the skulls belonged to one of the victims, but Hiroshi refused to let it. So we had to wait until he calmed down. Thank you." Xia Dong thanked them sincerely. She could not imagine how much damage it would have done to Hiroshi Kitado if they had taken the skull away by force. The skull had probably become his emotional support during those inhumane days of detention. That night, Bailey Han made a call. The phone rang 3 times before it was picked up. "Mr. Bailey, you've received my gift to you. Don't forget your promise." Bailey Han leaned on the sofa and said calmly, "I remember very clearly that Su Murong will definitely get what she deserves." Shen Ran chuckled. "If that's the case, why are you still looking for me? Didn't you tell me your name because you wanted me to find you? My guess is that you should be the man in the 5th secret room." Shen Ran paused. After a while, his voice was cold. "You're right. I was like them, imprisoned in the secret room like a dog. But I was smarter than them. I abandoned my self-esteem and was willing to be her sex slave. I tried my best to please her, so I could walk out of that hell intact." Bailey Han said calmly, "I'm not interested in your past, and I won't investigate your identity. I just want to know the situation of the other 4 people. Their names, personal information, and why they were imprisoned by Su Murong." Shen Ran was silent for a moment and said, "I can tell you, but you have to promise me that you won't reveal anything about me. I just want to start a new life." Bailey Han slowly spat out 3 words. "I promise." "Okay, I believe you," Shen Ran said in a deep voice. "To put it more emotionally, each of us has a history of blood and tears. The man in the 1st secret room is called Qin Zhao. He is now 37 years old and has been imprisoned for 15 years. He is the first man Su Murong imprisoned. It is said that his eyes are similar to Su Murong's first love. He once tried to escape, but the bodyguards broke all the bones in his body. He was paralyzed on the bed like a living dead. The second man is called Shaolin. He is 35 years old and has been imprisoned for 14 years. Because his nose and mouth are similar to Su Murong's first love, he also tried to escape, but failed. His legs were cut off while he was still alive. The third man is called Li Donghao. He is 30 years old and has been imprisoned for 10 years. His chin is similar to Su Murong's first love. He is very strong and has a strong personality. He refused to be Su Murong's sex slave, so she tried all kinds of ways to humiliate him, train him, and finally turned him into a dog. The fourth man is called Liang Yuan. He is the youngest among us, only 28 years old. He was imprisoned when he was 15 years old. He is different from us, Not because he looks like anyone, but because he is too beautiful. He is Su Murong's favorite plaything? Bailey Han's deep black eyes were cold. So, the main reason why Su Murong imprisoned you is because you look like her lover. Shen Ran smiled bleakly. Yes, it's funny, isn't it? Because of a face, we lost the basic right to be human. Last question, what's with the skull in Liang Yuan's hand? Shen Ran sighed. Actually, that's the head of the girl he likes. Bailey Han's pupils suddenly shrank. When he was about 18 years old, Su Murong changed a younger maid to deliver food to us. Although the maid was mute, she was very beautiful. She was about the same age as a Yuan, and they gradually developed feelings for each other. She wanted to help us escape, so she used the excuse of going out to buy things. In fact, she wanted to go to the police station to report to the police, but she was discovered by the bodyguards who were secretly following her. Shen Ran paused. When he spoke again, his voice was already hoarse. Su Murong killed her. She chopped off her head and threw it into a Yuan's room. It turns out that she already knew that the maid and a Yuan had feelings for each other. She wanted to use this method to take revenge on a Yuan. From then on, a Yuan's mental state became abnormal. Shen Ran's voice was filled with murderous intent and anger. Su Murong is not a human at all. She's a beast. Bailey Han's eyes were deep and dark. I'll definitely do what I promised you. Su Murong, she deserves to die. Thank you. Other than Hiroshi Kitato, the police had not found out the identities of the other 3 people. Just when their investigation was in a deadlock, Bailey Han organized the information he learned from Shen Ran into a document and sent it to the police station anonymously. The police knew the names of the 3 people and accurately understood the year they went missing. After more than half a month of investigation, they finally found the family members of the 3 people. When they went missing, they were still young men in their early 20s. Now, they had been tortured until they were emaciated and skinny. They no longer looked as handsome as when they were young. Their family members hugged them and cried bitterly. These families were agitated and joined forces to sue Su Murong. They repeatedly appealed in front of the media and asked for the help of public opinion. They vowed to sentence Su Murong to death. This heartless and illegal detention attracted widespread attention and aroused public anger. Some university students even hung banners outside the Su family's villa to demonstrate. In short, everyone wanted to kill Su Murong. Mika Kito saw his brother being tortured like that with his own eyes. He also resented Su Murong. He ordered his godfather, who had been abducted and sold to the black mines in Africa, to be killed. Then he applied to visit Su Murong. At this time, Su Murong was no longer as radiant as she used to be. She was like a withered rose, showing signs of old age, but still armed herself with indifference and arrogance. She looked coldly at Mika Kito across the glass and said flatly, "Mika Kito, are you here to laugh at my situation?" Su Murong, do you know that Liang Yuan, who has been imprisoned by you for 13 years, is my brother? Mika Kito's deep black eyes were like sharp swords, ruthlessly stabbing into her body. Su Murong's lawyer had already mentioned this to her, so she did not show a surprised expression. She looked up indifferently. That's a pity. I should have killed him earlier. Mika Kito gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. If looks could kill, he would have died 1,000 times. He suddenly snorted and said coldly, "Didn't you imprison them because they look like Shangguan Ao? Don't you want to know where Shangguan Ao is now?" Su Murong's body trembled. Her eyes quickly landed on his face, and there was an imperceptible urgency in her voice. His disappearance has something to do with you? Mika Kito leaned forward, almost touching the glass, and said clearly, "He's not missing. He's dead." Su Murong's eyes suddenly widened. The calmness that she pretended to be collapsed. She twisted her fingers together and glared at him angrily. "It's you. You're the one who killed him." "No, it's not me. It's you." Mika Kito slowly leaned back and said flatly, "He wouldn't have died, but because of a Yuan he wanted to compensate you." Boom. Su Murong's head was about to explode. She shouted emotionally, "No, I don't believe it." Mika Kito curled his lips mockingly. He took out a necklace from his pocket, raised it in the air, and shook it gently. Do you still remember this? Attention, Shinwoo 799. Chapter 362. Su Murong stared at the pendant of the necklace. It was a small and exquisite key. It was the key to her private safe. She had given it to Shangguan Ao back then because the safe contained the love letters that Shangguan Ao had written to her and their photos. She wanted the two of them to keep that memory together. Mika Kito slowly took back the necklace under her pained and desperate gaze. He put it back into his pocket and said lightly, "He loved you deeply too. Until the last moment of his life, he was still calling out your name and Su Xingchen's name." "No, don't say any more, don't say any more." Su Murong hugged her head with both hands. She screamed and cried in the wind. Bei Tangshan stood up and looked down at her. She was like a mental patient who was beating her head and crying hysterically. His deep eyes did not have any warmth. It was so cold that it was scary. A month later, Su Murong was sentenced to death and stripped of her political rights for life. Half a month later, Su Murong was executed, ending her evil life. In the blink of an eye, it was already July and the sun was blazing. People came and went in the airport lobby. It was a scene of countless parting and reunions. Xia Dong and Bailey Han led the children to send Mika Kito and his brother off. Hiroshi Kito was wearing a white t-shirt and light blue jeans. He looked like a big boy. He hugged a white doll in his arms and stood timidly behind Mika Kito. He looked like a frightened rabbit and quietly peeked his head out to look at Xia Dong and the others. Suzaku stood beside him with a gentle smile on her face. She comforted him gently. Don't be afraid. They're all your friends. They won't hurt you." Mika Kito glanced sideways at Suzu and Hiroshi Kito. A smile appeared in his eyes. He turned to Xia Dong and said, "Ein is very clingy to Suzaku now." Xia Dong smiled and said gently, "Suzaku is so patient. Ayun will definitely get better." Mika Kito walked forward and suddenly opened his arms to hug her. He ignored Bailey Han's cold gaze and said softly, Xia, I'm leaving. Take care of yourself and the children." Xia Dong also hugged him and said sadly, "Brother Shin, will you never come back?" Mika Kito stroked her hair affectionately. "Silly, of course not. I just want to take a Yuan home to pay respects to my parents. I want a Yuan to recuperate in the place where we were born. We'll be back after a while." Bailey Han's vinegar jar had been knocked over long ago, and his stomach was rumbling with jealousy. He reached out and pulled Xia Dong out of Bei Tangshan's arms, interrupting the two of them. He put on a fake smile and said, "I wish you a safe journey." Mika Kito looked at him meaningfully. "Treat Xia well. Otherwise, I won't let you off." Bailey Han raised his eyebrows and smiled. Xia is my wife. I'll naturally treat her well. Uncle Shen will miss you very much." Gigai, the little fat cat, ran forward and hugged Mika Kito's legs. She raised her pink little face and blinked her beautiful big eyes. "Uncle Shin, you have to miss us too." Mika Kito picked her up and rubbed her little head with a smile. The little girl was in an advantageous position. She waved at Hiroshi Kito, who was hiding and watching curiously. She said with a smile, "Uncle Shen, my name is Xiao Guai. You have to remember me." Hiroshi Kito stared at the little girl in surprise. He imitated his brother and slowly reached out his arm to stroke her soft hair. He whispered, "Gigai?" Xiao Guai clapped her hands and laughed happily. "Uncle Shin, you're so smart. I only said it once, and you remembered my name." Hiroshi Kito's clear eyes moved. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, revealing a shy smile. Mika Kito kissed Xiao Guai's face excitedly. "Gigai, you're amazing. This is the first time Ayuan has taken the initiative to talk to someone." Xiao Guai tilted her head and giggled. The sadness of parting was swept away, and everyone was immersed in joy. It was time to board the plane. Mika Kito, the brothers, and Suzuka walked step by step to the boarding gate under the watchful eyes of Xia Dong and the others. They began to embark on a new journey in life. Xia Dong and Bailey Han's marriage also entered a new chapter. When little Hai Hai was 1 year old, Xia Dong returned to work at Glamour magazine as the director. Because of her unique taste and style, she was somewhat famous in the fashion industry. Although she was busy with work, she would never neglect her family because of work. In her heart, her family was the most important. She was the envy of all the women in a city. However, outsiders did not know that she also had her own troubles. Little Hai Hai was already 2.5 years old, but she still could not speak. Back then, Xiao Bao and Xiao Guai could already make sentences freely at her age. Xia Dong thought that her drug addiction had affected little Hai Hai, who was still in her mother's womb. She specially took her to the hospital for a full body checkup. The doctor said that Hai Hai was very healthy. Although most children could speak at around 1.5 years old, every child had their own uniqueness. There were also some special children who could only speak at the age of 3. It was normal for them to grow up. The doctor advised parents to give their children more stimulation by talking to them and telling them stories. Thus, as long as they had time, Xia Dong and Bailey Han would hold Hai Hai and point to the things in the room to teach her. This is the TV, this is the sofa, this is the dog. Little Cece wiggled her little body and jumped down from her parents' arms. She ran to the things that they were pointing at and touched them here and there. She had a curious look on her face and sometimes she giggled, but she was unwilling to open her mouth and learn to speak. Xia Dong was helpless. Bailey Han rubbed her hair. Wife, don't worry. Hai Hai actually understands in her heart and can understand what we are saying. Perhaps she just doesn't want to say it. When she wants to speak, she will naturally speak. All right, then I'll be a little more patient. Xia Dong hugged his neck and rubbed against his chest. In the past, when she rubbed against him, he would take the opportunity to do something sneaky. Today, he actually gently pushed her away. Xia Dong was puzzled. Thinking about it, the two of them hadn't been intimate for 5 or 6 days, which wasn't his style at all. She raised her head and kissed his smooth chin, then whispered into his ear, "Hubby, it seems like we haven't been intimate for a long time." With that, she gently bit his earlobe. She knew that it was his sensitive spot. Sure enough, his body suddenly tensed up and he hugged her tightly. He said in a low voice, "Wife, I've been a little tired these past 2 days." "Oh, so that's how it is? I thought you were tired of me," Xia Dong said half-truthfully. She looked up at him with sparkling eyes and a slight smile. He flicked her forehead in annoyance. "You're talking nonsense. How could I be tired of you?" "That's good." Xia Dong hugged his waist in satisfaction, then jumped down from his embrace. She ran behind him and massaged his shoulders. "Hubby, you've worked hard. Wifey will help you massage your shoulders." Xia Dong took Bailey Han's tiredness to heart. She specially took a day off to boil a pot of chicken soup at home and cooked a few dishes that he liked. She packed them in a lunchbox and planned to send them to the office to give him a little surprise. During the lunch break, the company's employees had all gone to eat. The office was empty, and even the secretary's desk was empty. Xia Dong directly pushed open the door to the CEO's office. There was no one there. Could it be that Ahan had also gone out for lunch? She placed the lunchbox on the desk and took out her phone. She planned to call him to ask where he was, but before she could make the call, she suddenly heard a strange sound. It seemed to be coming from the lounge. She put away her phone and walked towards the lounge. She held the door handle and gently turned it. When she pushed open the door, her whole body froze. A man and a woman were lying on the bed in the lounge. The man was of course her husband. His suit jacket was carelessly thrown on the floor, and his shirt was unbuttoned. His face was flushed, and his eyes were filled with desire. The woman was Bailey Han's newly hired secretary, Lin Wei. Her clothes were untidy, and she was only wearing a sexy underwear. She was straddling Bailey Han's waist in a riding position. Xia Dong crossed her arms and calmly looked at the messy bed. She said lightly, "It seems that I've disturbed you. Please continue, don't worry about me." A trace of annoyance flashed across Lin Wei's eyes. Just as she was lost in thought, Bailey Han suddenly raised his arm and ruthlessly threw her onto the floor. He stared at her with bloodshot eyes. Scram! Lin Wei awkwardly picked up the clothes on the floor and rushed out of the lounge from Xia Dong's side with the clothes. Xia Dong still crossed her arms and leaned against the door motionlessly. She calmly looked at Bailey Han. Bailey Han breathed heavily, his chest heaving violently. He staggered up from the bed and threw himself at her. "Wife, let me explain." His entire body was leaning against her, the sweat on his forehead dripping down his temples. His body was tense like a rock, and his hoarse voice was filled with desire. "Wifey, shoo." Xia Dong supported him with one hand and covered his mouth with the other. "If you're feeling uncomfortable, then don't talk. That damned woman, how much drug did she give you?" She wasn't a fool. It only took her 2 seconds to determine that he had been drugged. His face was abnormally red. Bailey Han's anxious heart finally calmed down. His body was boiling hot, his throat was itchy, and a fishy sweet taste surged into his mouth. Just now, he had completely used his willpower to resist the powerful medicinal properties of the aphrodisiac. His body was already reaching its limit, so his qi and blood were especially turbulent. Xia Dong was helpless. She didn't want to be a tool to neutralize the drug, but she couldn't watch her husband suffer. She reached out to unbuckle his belt and said, "You'd better be careful in the future. If there's a next time, you can suffocate to death." If she hadn't come in time, he might have lost his virginity. Thinking of this, she was inexplicably angry. "Sorry." He hugged her tightly and eagerly kissed her lips. "Oh, wait a minute." Just as he was about to carry her onto the bed, she grabbed his arm tightly and stopped him from doing so. She quickly flipped the quilt and sheets on the bed to the ground. She didn't want to smell another woman's scent. Their bodies were tightly pressed together as they lay on the soft mattress. Their hot breaths intertwined. Their seductive moans intertwined into a sweet melody. The room was filled with a romantic atmosphere. The ambiguous atmosphere lingered in the air and didn't dissipate for a long time. After an unknown amount of time, he was still tirelessly tasting her. She curled up under him and softly whimpered, "Don't stop, baby, it'll be done soon." A certain someone was sweating profusely. You lie to me every time." Every time, he said it would be done soon, but in reality, he still wanted to torture her for at least half an hour. "I'm not lying to you this time." He moved fiercely and stopped. Then, he hugged her tightly in his arms and kissed her sweaty cheek. After a short rest, he reached out to pick up his coat and draped it over her. He lovingly stroked her hair and whispered, "Honey, thank you for believing in me." Xia Dong was so tired that she couldn't even open her eyes. She muttered unhappily, "If I hadn't rushed over, you would have been eaten." He tucked her wet hair behind her ear. "No, even if you hadn't come, I would have chased her out. Even if I were to suffocate to death, I wouldn't betray you." She struggled to open her eyes. "Really? Of course it's true. I'm yours alone. No one else can touch me." He leaned over and kissed her forehead, hugging her tightly in his arms. Xia Dong's lips curled into a smile. Satisfied, she fell asleep. When she woke up, the room was dark. Xia Dong frowned and slowly woke up. As her vision gradually regained focus, she realized that she was lying on the bed in the lounge. Her body was dry. Bailey Han must have helped her wash up. He even helped her change into clean clothes. When she got out of bed, her legs were sore and her waist was sore. She rubbed her back and walked out of the lounge in her slippers. At this moment, Bailey Han was sitting behind his desk. His back was straight and the soft light enveloped his body, outlining his perfect figure. His handsome side profile looked extremely charming. His thin lips were slightly pursed and his slender fingers moved quickly on the keyboard, making clicking sounds. She leaned against the door and looked at him, the corners of her lips curling up. "Come and see." Hongcha 866. Chapter 363. He suddenly turned his head to look at her. His sexy lips curved upwards and his dark eyes were full of smiles. He looked at her affectionately. "You're awake." Xia Dong smiled and walked to his side. He stretched out his long arm and pulled her into his embrace. He let her sit on his lap and said gently, "Are you hungry? Do you want to eat something first?" "I'm not hungry." She hugged his waist with both hands. "What time is it now?" It's almost 7. Ah, I actually slept for so long? Why didn't you wake me up? He ruffled her hair and chuckled softly. Little lazy kitten, you were sleeping so soundly. How could I bear to wake you up? You waited for me for so long. Are you hungry? She snuggled in his arms. I'm not hungry yet. I've finished all the lunchboxes you brought me. He pinched her nose and smiled mischievously. Besides, I ate a delicious meal like you. I won't be hungry so easily. Xia Dong snorted. Tell me honestly, how did she drug you? Bailey Han smiled bitterly. She looked up and pinched his cheek. Chase her away. I don't want to keep a woman who covets my husband in the company. I've already asked her to leave when you were asleep. Xia Dong mumbled. I remember that Lin Wei just graduated from university not long ago. Why can't girls think things through these days? What's so good about a married old man like you? Old man? Bailey Han's mouth twitched. He had to remind her, Honey, I'm only 33 years old. I'm in my prime, suave and handsome. Stop. Xia Dong interrupted him and laughed mischievously. But you were so tired a few days ago that you didn't want to touch me anymore, right? Bailey Han's eyes flashed with embarrassment. He coughed and said, A week ago, I had a sterilization operation. According to the doctor's advice, we can't have sex for a week. Xia Dong's eyes widened and her mouth was wide open. Suddenly she burst into laughter. Bailey Han's cheeks were slightly hot. He rubbed her hair. Stop laughing. Xia Dong rubbed her stomach that was hurting from laughing. No, I'm not laughing at your operation. I just suddenly thought of something. What if Lin Wei drugged you 2 days ago? Bailey Han looked a little helpless. If that's the case, you can only use cold water or go to the hospital. Xia Dong gradually stopped laughing. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed his lips seriously. Hubby, I'm very glad that she didn't drug you in advance. Otherwise, you would definitely have a hard time. A smile appeared in Bailey Han's charming eyes. His heart was as soft as a feather. He gazed into her eyes and his sexy thin lips curved slightly. He said word by word, I'm also very fortunate to have you in this life. The two looked at each other and smiled. On Xia Dong's birthday, the whole family celebrated her grandly. The next day, Bailey Han took her to his private jet, saying that they were going to make up for their honeymoon. When they first got married, they encountered the kidnapping scene directed and acted by Su Yunqian. Later, they went to Rome to wait for delivery. They never had the chance to make up for their honeymoon. The two of them had originally discussed taking Hai with them. However, when the plane was about to take off, the careless parents realized that little Hai, who was sitting in the baby stroller, was missing. Xia Dong anxiously wanted to get off the plane to look for her, but Bailey Han carried her back. Honey, don't worry. Xiao Yi and the other two took Hai away. Xia Dong panicked. You knew? Why didn't you stop them? Honey, this is a gift from Xiao Yi and the others. They said that they would help us take care of Hai. They are already big kids, so it won't be a problem. Although you say that, I still don't feel at ease. There are housekeepers and servants in the villa. They will help take care of Hai. Don't worry. Enjoy our time together. The plane carried the secretly delighted Bailey Han and the uneasy Xia Dong to their holiday destination, Europe. They would have a month to enjoy the local customs and customs of Europe. They would also go to Italy to visit the elderly Tomek. On the other side, Xiao Yi, Xiao Bao, and Xiao Guai were playing with their little sister, Hai. 3 8-year-old children taking care of the 2.5-year-old Xiao Bao's baby. No matter how one thought about it, they were a little worried. Therefore, when the old madam found out that Hai didn't go on a holiday with Bailey Han and his wife, she asked the housekeeper to bring the 4 children to the old mansion. However, the children refused and said that their summer homework was to learn how to take care of their little sister. Therefore, they wanted to take care of Hai on their own. The old madam's worry was like a flood flowing out of control. Therefore, she ordered the housekeeper and servants in the villa to protect the young master and Mississippi. If there was an accident, they were to bring their heads to see me. On the lawn of the villa. Hai, look, Dauda likes you a lot. She keeps licking your face with her tongue. Xiao Bao rubbed Daodu's big furry head and laughed foolishly at Hai Hai, who had a bitter expression on her face. Hai Hai's delicate little face scrunched up. She pushed Daodu's big head with her little hand. Daodu licked her face with her saliva. It was so uncomfortable. Hai Hai, you don't like Daodu licking your face? Then Big Brother will help you chase Daodu away. Xiao Bao patted Daodu's head. Daodu, stop licking. Hurry up and retract your big tongue. You're scaring Hai Hai. Awoo! It hurt her self-esteem. Daodu shook her big furry head and retracted her tongue dejectedly. She lay on the lawn listlessly with her 2 paws under her chin. She stared pitifully at Hai Hai with her big watery eyes and whined. Little mistress, don't despise me. I know how to act cute. Hai Hai blinked her sparkling eyes and carefully approached Daodu. She stretched out her chubby little hand and gently stroked its fur. Awoo, awoo. The second sound came from little Hai Hai. Xiao Bao hugged her excitedly. Hai Hai, this is Daodu. She's called Daodu. Hai Hai blinked her big eyes and looked at him. She didn't understand why her brother was so excited. She thought for a moment and opened her mouth to bark. Woof woof. She's not called Woof Woof. She's called Daodu. Come and say it with Big Brother. Daodu, woof woof. Hai Hai was stubborn. Dogs should bark, woof woof woof. That was how the dogs on TV were supposed to bark. Just as the siblings were shouting, and woof 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 woof, Xiao Yi and Xiao Guai walked out of the villa. Xiao Yi was holding a fruit platter in her arms and Xiao Guai was holding Hai Hai's plush toy. They waved at the 2 people and 1 dog, gathered together from afar. Big Brother, Hai Hai, come and eat some fruit. Xiao Bao shouted excitedly, come over quickly. Hai Hai spoke. Hai Hai really spoke. That's great. Xiao Yi and Xiao Guai ran over excitedly. Xiao Yi stuffed the fruit platter into Xiao Bao's arms. She held Hai Hai's little shoulder and said excitedly, Hai Hai, call Big Brother E. I'm your Big Brother E. Xiao Guai didn't want to be outdone and squeezed in front of Hai Hai. No. You should call me Big Sister first. Hai Hai, call me Big Sister. Xiao Bao squatted in front of Hai Hai and blinked his big beautiful eyes to get her attention. I was the one who noticed Hai Hai speaking first. You should call me Big Brother Hai Hai first. Call me Big Brother Bao. Hai Hai's black eyes darted from one to the other before she started giggling. Her innocent and cheerful smile infected the 3 siblings, and they started laughing as well. The children's childish laughter echoed in the sky and dyed the clouds in the horizon red. Sit in a row and eat some fruit. Xiao Guai sat down on the lawn and patted the spot next to her with a sweet smile on her face. Hai Hai, come sit next to Big Sister. Hai Hai let go of Lil P's ear and ran over to Xiao Guai's side, swinging her little butt. She copied her and sat on the lawn with her legs stretched out, swinging her little feet. She was extremely cute. Quiet. Big Brother Bao will feed you some fruit. Xiao Bao used a toothpick to stick a piece of watermelon and fed it to Hai Hai. Be good. Open your mouth. Okay. Hai Hai nodded Gigai and opened her little mouth to bite the watermelon. She chewed slowly, her pink cheeks puffed up like white and tender Xiaolongbao. Little mischievous, you're covered in dog fur. Xiao Yi patted the dog fur on her clothes gently for fear of hurting her. After eating the fruit, Xiao Guai used a tissue to wipe Hai Hai's little face and hands. She stroked her soft hair. Hai Hai, are you tired? Do you want to go back to the room and sleep? Cici shook her little head like a rattledrum, puffed up her face and muttered, no. Hai Hai spoke again. It was as if the 3 siblings had been injected with chicken blood. They all gathered in front of her and stared at her like searchlights. They coaxed her like wolves. Hai Hai, say a few more words. Big Sister, Big Brother, will give you delicious, fun things to eat. Hai Hai tilted her little head and looked at them for a while. Suddenly, she turned around and pointed at Lil P behind her. Woof woof, the 3 siblings. Okay, woof woof it is. It's better than not talking. Lil P, teary eyes. Actually, my name is Lil P. Hai Hai turned around and pointed at Xiao Yi with her chubby little finger. She spat out 2 words clearly. Hey, Xiao Yi was shocked. Her little finger turned to Xiao Bao. Baby, Xiao Bao was also petrified. Finally, her little finger turned to Xiao Guai. Gigai, wah, although I don't have the word big sister, I'm still so happy. Xiao Guai rushed to hug Hai Hai and kissed her little face. Hai Hai is the best. Ah, I want it too. Xiao Bao pounced over and bit Hai Hai's cheek. Xiao Yi didn't want to be left behind. She also went up and bit her on the other cheek. Hai Hai wiped her cheek innocently and pointed at Lil P. Woof woof, kiss kiss. Xiao Bao immediately reacted. Lil P had licked Hai Hai's face just now. Sob sob, they had all indirectly kissed Lil P. She quickly ran to the side and spat her saliva with a look of disgust. Xiao Yi and Xiao Guai, who had missed the truth, didn't feel any pressure. They didn't know what Xiao Bao was doing and giggled as they played with Hai Hai. The sky was blue and the clouds were white. The sea breeze was warm. Dusk had arrived and the curtains were drawn. The sky was very dark in the room. Xia Dong rubbed her eyes and got up from the bed. The spot beside her was empty. She knew that he wouldn't have gone far, but her heart still felt empty. She walked to the window barefoot and was about to open the curtains when a pair of arms suddenly hugged her tightly from behind. The chest that was pressed against her back was broad and warm, giving her a very reassuring feeling. She turned around and threw herself into his arms. Breathing in his unique scent, she murmured, "Hubby, where did you go?" I answered the phone. It's Xiao Yi and the rest. Bailey Han rubbed her hair and chuckled. Honey, let me tell you a piece of good news. Hai Hai spoke. Really? Xia Dong quickly raised her head and looked at Bailey Han in disbelief. She said excitedly, Hubby, let's go home. Let's go home now. I want to hear Hai Hai call me mommy. Bailey Han chuckled. I also want to hear Hai Hai call me daddy. But honey, our two-person world has just begun. Don't ruin it, okay? We can listen to Hai Hai speak through the video. Okay. Xia Dong nodded vigorously. Through the video, Xia Dong saw the four children sitting obediently in a group. Hai Hai sat in the middle, holding a duckling toy in her arms. She bared her beautiful white teeth and made funny faces at Xia Dong and Bailey Han in the video. Xia Dong clapped her hands and said softly, Hai Hai, call me mommy. I'm your mommy. Hai Hai smiled cutely and said in a childish voice, Kitty. Xia Dong was stunned at first, then she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Ah! The children burst into laughter. It's not Kitty, it's mommy. Hai Hai, say it again, mommy. Xia Dong deliberately dragged her voice so that she could hear it more clearly. Hai Hai covered her face shyly and said in a childish voice again, Kitty. Xia Dong covered her face and burst into tears. Bailey Han rubbed her hair and whispered, Don't worry. Don't discourage Hai Hai. Xia Dong immediately perked up. Hai Hai, this is your daddy. Call him daddy. Hai Hai smiled sweetly. Daddy. A sense of pride rose from the bottom of his heart. Bailey Han beamed. Hai Hai is so obedient. Say it again. Daddy, say it again. Daddy. The little girl had just learned how to speak and was very excited. She pointed at everyone and said, Woof, baby, gigai, kitty, daddy, woof. Even Lil P was in line. Lil P was very pleased. On both sides of the video, there was endless laughter. Distance would not cut off the bond between them. They were a family, a happy family. After reluctantly ending the call, Xia Dong leaned lazily in Bailey Han's arms and muttered, When the children grow up, we'll be old too. Bailey Han hugged her tightly and chuckled softly. Will you dislike me when I'm old? She looked up at him excitedly. Of course not. He kissed her forehead gently. I won't either. Even if your hair turns white and all your teeth fall out, I'll still hold your hand and watch the sunrise and sunset with you. So, you see, old age isn't scary because I'll be with you until you grow old. Her eyes were full of smiles. She held his hand tightly and interlocked their fingers. I'll hold your hand and grow old with you. He suddenly turned over and pressed her under his body. His deep eyes were full of smiles and the corners of his lips curled up seductively. Wifey, while we're still young, let's do more things that we love to do. His smile made her blush and her heart beat faster, but she was willing to indulge in it for the rest of her life. Shinwoo 799. Chapter 364. Brother Kansen, I saw a... He's alive, he's still alive, but his condition isn't very good. So he was imprisoned by Su Murong. On the plane, what Xia Dong said lingered in Mika Kito's mind. He clenched his fists tightly, and his body trembled uncontrollably. His nose was sour, and his chest was tight as if it was about to explode. How long has it been since he was in such pain? Scenes flashed through Mika Kito's mind. When he was still a little boy, no matter where he went, he would always hold the hand of his younger brother, who was 3 years younger than him. He loved it when his younger brother looked at him with admiration and called him brother. So he always worked hard to make himself stronger. He helped his younger brother chase away the bad kids who bullied him, helped his younger brother with his handicraft homework, and taught this clingy little tail of his to learn martial arts. Unknowingly, something cold slipped from the corner of his eyes. Suzaku, who was sitting next to Mika Kito, pretended not to see anything. She quietly turned her head and looked out the window. The beautiful sunset dyed the sky red, and the golden sunlight shone through the window and onto the floor. Mika Kito stood at the door of the ward like a statue, staring deeply at the boy in white who was sitting on the floor with his back to him. He was very, very thin, and the white hospital gown seemed to be hanging on his body. His head was lowered, and all his attention was on the skull in his arms. His slender fingers gently stroked the skull, and his movements were so gentle that it was as if he was stroking the hair of his lover. Bei Tangshan squatted in front of him and looked at his familiar yet unfamiliar face. The two brothers' eyebrows were somewhat similar, but Bei Tang Yuan's face was a little smaller, his chin was a little sharper, and his facial features looked a little more beautiful. His current appearance overlapped with his face when he was young and heavily intruded into Bei Tangshan's mind. He could no longer control his emotions and suddenly hugged his younger brother tightly. His lips couldn't stop trembling and his chest violently rose and fell. Ayuan, I'm your older brother. Ayuan, I've finally found you. Hiroshi Kitato was like a puppet, letting him hug him without saying a word. The tears in Mika Kito's eyes finally rolled down. Outside the ward, Suzaku pressed her back against the wall and slowly closed her eyes. Something sparkling and translucent fell from the corner of her eyes. After a long time, Mika Kito came out of the ward. She was expressionless and exuded a cold aura. Suzaku moved away from the wall. She looked at him and said calmly, I've talked to the doctor. He can bring Ayuan home today. Mika Kito's deep eyes fell on her. You've never interfered in my personal affairs. There was no accusation or displeasure in his tone, only curiosity. Suzaku pursed her lips. I've already settled the discharge procedures. Mika Kito's eyes flickered, but she didn't say anything else. He brought Hiroshi Kitato back to his villa. The room arranged for Hiroshi Kitato faced the garden. All kinds of flowers were in full bloom, and there was a small lake behind the garden. A group of wild ducks swam in the lake. Every morning, they quacked happily, and the chirping of the birds in the trees combined to form a joyful morning song. Bei Tang Yuan moved into a new environment. He was very calm, or rather, very indifferent. He was like a robot, silently accepting the arrangements given to him by the outside world. He didn't reveal the slightest bit of dislike or affection. He hugged his skull and stood in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling window, quietly looking into the distance. He didn't respond to Mika Kito's instructions at all. Suzaku stopped Mika Kito in the corridor. She pursed her lips and said, I want to take care of Ayuan. Mika Kito stared into her eyes. His deep gaze was as if he wanted to see through her organs. He said solemnly, You treat Ayuan differently. I want to know the reason. Suzaku's calm gaze cracked. She pursed her lips and said calmly, I won't hurt Ayuan. I just want him to get better soon. You don't want to tell me the reason. Mika Kito paused and continued, Or, you can't tell me the reason. She clenched her fists and said slowly, I can't tell you the reason. He looked at her deeply. After a while, he said, Okay, you'll take care of him. He believed in her. He believed that she wouldn't do anything to hurt Ayuan. She said slowly, Thank you. At first, Mikakito was a little worried. He was worried that Suzaku was a killer and didn't know how to take care of others like other women. However, he soon realized that he was wrong. Suzaku was always cold in front of others, including Mikakito. She rarely smiled. However, in front of Aang, she showed a side of her that no one knew. She was meticulous, patient, and gentle. She smiled and told stories to Yuan. She gently helped him dry his wet hair. She held his hand and walked around the villa. She pulled him to hide behind a rock to observe the ducks. She matched clothes for him and made him look handsome and charming. Then, she took him to the amusement park, the zoo, and the aquarium. Mikakito tried his best to find time to participate in their activities. He watched as Yuan gradually gained awareness of his surroundings under Suzaku's care. He watched as he became more and more dependent on Suzaku, just like a newborn animal instinctively relying on its mother. At night on the rooftop, the night breeze was blowing and the sky was dotted with stars. A tall figure stood by the railing with a can of beer in his hand. He raised his head and took a big gulp. The crisp sound of high heels came from behind him. A faint, familiar fragrance was carried to his nose by the night breeze. He didn't need to look to know who it was. "You always like to drink alone." Suzaku walked to his side and leaned against the railing. She also had a can of beer in her hand. Mikakito looked at the night sky in the distance and said indifferently, "Is Yuan asleep?" "Yuan is very obedient today. He's willing to talk to me." Suzaku was in a good mood at the mention of Hiroshi Kitato. Her tone was light. "Just now, I poured him a glass of warm milk. He didn't want to drink it, so he shook his head and refused. This is the first time that he's willing to show his emotions." Mikakito's lips curled up. He turned to look at her. Under the starlight, her face was full of joy. There was a smile in her delicate eyes, and she was as happy as a child. He touched her with the can of beer and said in a deep voice, "This is all thanks to you." "Thank you." She grinned, revealing her beautiful teeth. She said heroically, "Cheers." The two of them didn't hesitate and finished the can of beer in one gulp. Suzaku waved the can of beer in her hand and frowned in frustration. "There's no more. I should have brought a few more cans." Mikakito's eyes were filled with joy. He lifted his chin in a certain direction. "I still have a stash. It's over there. Wait here. I'll go get it." Her eyes curved. She really ran in the direction he pointed and brought over a can of beer. Beitangshan took the beer she handed over and jumped onto the platform that was more than 2 meters high. He sat on the edge of the platform and opened the can of beer with a click. Suzaku's lips curled up slightly. She jumped up and sat beside him. She looked at the bright night view of the city and said indifferently, "This is the second time we're sitting here drinking." Mikakito grunted and looked straight ahead. "Do you want to bet again?" Suzaku teased. "Aren't you afraid that I'll assassinate you while you're drunk?" He said indifferently, "No." The two of them had been through many life and death situations together. He had long regarded her as one of his own. Suzuka's eyes were filled with a faint smile. She waved the can of beer in her hand. "What shall we bet on this time?" Mikakito stared at her with a deep gaze. He said slowly, "We'll bet on a question. The winner can ask the loser a question." Suzaku ran her fingers through her hair and chuckled. "I know what question you want to ask me, but I won't lose." "Then prove it to me." Just like the previous time, they clinked their beer cans together, indicating that the bet was established. However, the difference was that their eyes were no longer cold. Instead, there was a faint smile in them. Empty wine cans were thrown onto the floor one after another, making clanking sounds. They were like machines that did not know fatigue, repeating the action of drinking. Occasionally, they would stop and look into the distance. No one spoke. The night was eerily silent. After drinking a lot, Suzaku's eyes started to blur. Her cheeks were faintly pink. She muttered softly, "My stomach is so bloated." As she spoke, she patted her bulging belly. Mikakito's eyes were still cold. He had never seen such a coquettish expression on her face. He chuckled. "It's no wonder your stomach isn't bloated after drinking so much." He snatched the beer can from her hand. Stop drinking. You're already drunk. She frowned and pouted her red lips. Who said I'm drunk? I'm very sober. Let's continue drinking. I won't lose to you. You're already drunk. I'm not. Mika Kito stretched out 2 fingers. How many fingers are these? She stared at his fingers and thought for a long time. TSK. You're an idiot. These are fingers. Mika Kito's lips twitched. You're really drunk. You've lost. You have to admit defeat. Answer me a question. A certain someone completely ignored him. His body leaned back and lay down on the high platform. Mika Kito leaned over and pushed her shoulder. Don't sleep. Go away. She waved her hand impatiently, shooing him away as though he were a fly. Tell me, do you and I know each other from before? Mika Kito leaned even closer to her. He was so close that he could see the blush on her cheeks under the starlight. She muttered softly. Yes. Do you know each other from before? He waited intently for her answer. Unexpectedly, she turned over and curled up her limbs, curling herself into a ball. Soon, the sound of steady breathing could be heard. She had fallen asleep. Mika Kito didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the woman curled up in a ball. He stretched out his hand to wake her up, but in the end, he changed his direction and put his arm around her waist. He carried her and jumped off the platform. Welfare, Shinmu 799. Chapter 365. A ray of sunlight shone into the room through the window. Suzaku rubbed her aching head and got up from the bed. She remembered that she had a drinking contest with Mika Kito last night and she seemed to have lost. He actually allowed her to get drunk in front of him. She really trusted him. She frowned and was a little unhappy with herself. She glanced sideways at the bedside alarm clock and exclaimed in annoyance, "Oh no, I missed breakfast with Anne." She actually slept until 9 o'clock. It was unbelievable for someone like her who was used to waking up early. Suzaku quickly jumped out of bed and rushed to the bathroom to wash up. Halfway through brushing her teeth, she suddenly remembered something. How did she get back to her room last night? Could it be that Mika Kito had sent her back? Suzaku got dressed and went downstairs. The maid who was cleaning the living room greeted her with a smile. "Miss Suzaku, good morning." Suzaku nodded and asked indifferently, "Where's second young master?" "Eldest young master is playing chess with second young master in the backyard." It was the weekend, so Mika Kito didn't need to go to the office. Suzaku casually ate 2 mouthfuls of breakfast and drank a glass of milk. She then brought 2 glasses of fresh orange juice to the backyard. From afar, she saw Mika Kito and his brother sitting on a hanging chair under the shade of a tree. There was a 5-in-a-row chessboard on a wooden table shaped like a tree stump. Mika Kito was wearing a white shirt and black trousers. His simple outfit couldn't hide his handsome figure and natural arrogance. He had a gentle smile on his face. His slender fingers were pointing at a certain position on the chessboard as he smiled and said something. Hiroshi Kitado was wearing a white t-shirt and light-colored casual pants. His handsome face had a troubled expression. His pink lips were pouting and his beautiful eyes were wet. He looked like he was about to cry. Suzaku quickened her pace and walked over to them. She placed 2 glasses of orange juice in each of their hands and smiled. What's wrong?" When Hiroshi Kitado saw his savior, he grabbed her hand tightly and shook it like a spoiled child. Suzaku smiled and stroked his soft hair comfortingly. Then she glanced at the chessboard and immediately understood what was going on. She looked at Mika Kito reproachfully. "Why didn't you let Ayuen win?" He already had 3 black stones in 2 places. No matter which side Ayuen blocked, he was going to win. No wonder Ayuen had such a pitiful expression. Suzaku's facial features were very charming. Usually, she looked cold and aloof, so no one dared to offend her. However, at this moment she was smiling gently. There was a hint of seductiveness in her reproach. Mika Kito was slightly stunned. Then he smiled. "Ayun, let's play again. Big brother will let you win, okay?" Hiroshi Kitado shook his head vigorously. His fair cheeks were puffed up. "Ayuen is angry. It's all your fault." Suzuka glared at Mika Kito and held Ayuen's hand. Let's go to the lake to see Greyley and Goldie, okay? Hiroshi Kitado nodded heavily. He held Suzuku's hand with one hand and his precious skull with the other. He smiled brightly. Let's go to the lake. Looking at his pure smile, Suzaku's heart was filled with warmth. Suzaku and Hiroshi Kitado walked in front. Hiroshi Kitado lowered his head and kicked the pebbles on the road from time to time. Every time a pebble hit his target, he would happily jump twice. Then he would turn to look at Suzaku and stare at her eagerly, like a child waiting for his parents to praise him. Every time this happened, Suzaku would stroke his hair and praise him with a smile. Ayuen is amazing. The two of them were getting closer to the lake. Suzaku suddenly felt that something was wrong. She turned around and looked at Mika Kito, who had been following them all the way. She raised her eyebrows. Why are you here? Mika Kito said sternly, I'm going to see Greyley and Goldie too. Suzaku smiled. She suddenly felt that the awkward look on this man's face was a little cute. Hiroshi Kitado was not the type to hold a grudge. He quickly forgot about the unpleasant incident during the game of chess. He let go of Suzaku's hand and ran to Mika Kito's side. He grinned and pointed at the wild ducks playing in the lake. He seemed to be inviting his older brother to see Greyley and Goldie with him. Mika Kito stroked his hair and smiled. Okay, I'll go see them with you. Hiroshi Kitado skipped in front while Mika Kito and Suzu walked side by side behind him. Suzaku coughed and said, Thank you for sending me back to my room last night. Mika Kito turned to look at her. You're welcome. But don't forget that you still owe me a question. Suzaku looked at Hiroshi Kitado's back and said calmly, I know what you want to ask. I don't want to hide it from you anymore. After a few seconds of silence, she said slowly, I grew up in an orphanage. When I was 5 years old, a new boy came to the orphanage. His name was Liang Yuan. It was said that his mother had passed away and he had no other relatives. When he was wandering on the streets, Director Lin found him and brought him back to the orphanage. When Yuan first came to the orphanage, he didn't say a word. He was very quiet and never cried or made a fuss. I don't know what happened to him to make a 6-year-old child so quiet. At that time, I was very cheerful and always made him talk and laugh. Perhaps I treated him as a good listener, so I even told him my secret. Mika Kito could not help but ask, What secret? Suzaku chuckled. When I was young, I was afraid of thunder. One thunderstorm, I hid in the closet and everyone looked for me. In the end, Ayun found me. I was afraid that he would laugh at me, so I told him that I wasn't afraid of thunder. I was just playing hide and seek here. I didn't expect him to smile. That was the first time he smiled at someone. He said, I know you're a brave girl. She seemed to be immersed in the memories of the past and there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. After that, we became very good friends. When I was 8 years old, I was adopted by an old man. Actually, it was an assassin organization. Just like that, I was groomed to be an assassin. When I grew up and returned to the orphanage to look for Ayuen, Director Lin told me that Ayuen went missing after school. I think he must have been imprisoned by Su Murong at that time. At the mention of Su Murong, Mika Kito's pupils shrank and he exuded a cold and murderous aura. Suzaku glanced at him and said indifferently, I'm actually very curious. Why did Ayuen appear in China? Mika Kito clenched his fists tightly. After a long time, he slowly released them and said in a low voice, When Ayuen was 5 years old, my mother found out that my father had a mistress outside. She was very angry and took Ayuen back to China. Later, my mother died in a car accident. As she could not contact her relatives, the police buried her in the cemetery and sent Ayuen to a welfare home. I heard from the person in charge of the welfare home that Ayuen ran away after less than a month. At this point, Mika Kito's tone suddenly changed and became cold. His gaze was terrifying. At first, I didn't understand why Ayuen ran away. Later, after investigating for a long time, I found out that Ayuen was bullied at the welfare home. Later, my father and I searched for Ayuen for many years, but we couldn't find him. I even thought that he had passed away. Mika Kito looked up at Hiroshi Kitado, who was playing by the lake, and said in a low voice, Ayuen used to be very naive and cheerful. The reason why he became silent after he came to the orphanage was because he lost his mother and was bullied by other children. Later, Ayuan was imprisoned by Su Murong and his beloved girl was killed. Why did his poor brother's life have to be filled with hardships? Suzaku read the sadness and hatred in Mika Kito's deep eyes. Her heart ached for Ayuan, but at the same time, there was a complicated feeling in her heart. She couldn't bear to see Mika Kito sad. She couldn't help but reach out and pat his shoulder. She said softly, "It's all in the past. Ayuan will get better." Mika Kito looked down at the hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry." She quickly retracted her hand and coughed. "I'll go accompany Ayuan first." Mika Kito stood where he was and looked at the scene of Ayuan and Suzaku sitting side by the lake. The hostility in his body gradually disappeared and there was a trace of warmth in his cold eyes. On the day of Su Murong's execution, Mika Kito went to the rooftop to drink again, but he didn't expect someone to arrive before him. Suzaku had already finished a can of beer. He walked to her side and said calmly, "Don't drink too much. I don't want to carry you back to the room." Suzaku smiled. "I'm very grateful that you didn't leave me here for the night last time." He looked at her expressionlessly. "Do I look like that kind of man?" She shrugged. They do look alike. Other than Xia Dong, who was full of tenderness, he was cold to all the other women. He took a sip of beer. "Then you're wrong." Suzaku chuckled and didn't dwell on this issue. After finishing the can of beer, Mika Kito said calmly, "I'm going to take Ayuan back to Japan. If you want to stay in City A, I won't stop you." She said without hesitation, "I'm going to Japan too." "When are we leaving?" "In a week's time." They spent a lot of effort to persuade Ayuan to put down the skull in her hand and replace it with a white plush toy before boarding the plane. When they were saying goodbye to Xia Dong's family at the airport, Ayuan spoke for the first time and called out Xiao Guai's name. Mika Kito and Suzaku were very happy. They believed that Ayuan would recover soon. Qingshan Spirit Garden was located in the center of Tokyo. It was one of the largest cemeteries in Tokyo. Mika Kito's parents were buried here. Looking from above, the Spirit Garden looked like Tokyo's Green Island. After walking through a cherry blossom path that was nearly 2 kilometers long, they saw tombstones under the shade of green trees. Surrounded by cherry blossom trees, 2 tombstones stood side by side on the lawn. Mika Kito placed 2 bouquets of flowers in front of the tombstones. She pulled Hiroshi Kitato to her side and said, "This is our father and mother." Add, Shinmu 799. Chapter 366. Mika Kito clasped her hands together and said slowly, "Father, Mother, I finally found a... If you know this in the afterlife, please rest in peace." Hiroshi Kito stared blankly at the photo on the tombstone. He stood there in a daze without moving. Mika Kito patted him on the shoulder and said softly, "I say a few words to Dad and Mom." He screamed as if he was suddenly awakened. He threw away the white toy in his hand and ran away with his hands covering his head. "You!" Mika Kito frowned and chased after him. Suzaku, who was waiting not far away, suddenly saw Hiroshi Kito running over with a pained expression on his face. Mika Kito chased after him. She frowned and stood in the middle of the road in front of Hiroshi Kito. She said softly, "Don't be afraid. I'm here. Will you? Hiroshi Kito threw himself into her arms and cried bitterly. Wu Yu Lin was the name that Director Lin had given to Suzu. She hugged Ayuan tightly and said, It's me. It's me. You finally remember me." "Worryless." He cried until he was out of breath in her arms. He muttered intermittently, "They're fighting. It's so scary. Mommy wants to take me away. I don't want to go. I want brother." Suzaku's eyes became misty. She patted his back gently and said, "Don't be afraid. I'm here. Your brother is here too." "Brother?" Hiroshi Kito looked up. His face was full of tears. He stared at her blankly. "Where's brother?" Mika Kito was standing 2 steps away from them. He clenched his fists and spoke in a low voice. Suzaku let go of Hiroshi Kito and patted him on the shoulder. "Brother is right there. Come here." Beiteng opened his arms. His deep eyes flashed with a bright light. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, carrying an encouraging smile. Hiroshi Kito stared at him in a daze for a long time. He carefully took a small step forward and then stopped. He seemed to be testing him. Seeing that he was still standing there with his arms open, Hiroshi Kito took another step forward. There was only a distance of 10 centimeters between them. He finally threw himself into Mika Kito's arms and cried out. He hugged him. "Brother, why are you so late? Mommy is dead. Mommy is dead. I'm sorry, it's all brother's fault. It's okay now. Good boy." Mika Kito's long eyelashes fluttered. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he hugged him tightly. "Big brother, I'm so scared. It's so cold and dark there. They even hit me." His tears drenched Beiteng's clothes. He curled up in Beiteng's embrace. A portion of the sealed memories in his brain were unsealed and gushed out. Fear made him tremble all over. "It's okay now. Brother is here. Brother won't let anyone hurt you anymore." Mika Kito choked with sobs. He couldn't control the tears in his eyes. At some point in time, the vermilion bird had already left. She hid behind a big tree and watched Mika Kito calm Ayuen's agitated emotions. She watched as he held Ayuen's shoulder and walked back to the tombstone. She watched as he taught Ayuen how to put his hands together to pay respects to his parents. She put her hands in her jeans pockets and walked slowly on the cherry blossom path. Then she sat on a rock and waited for the brothers. In the distance, two figures, one in black and one in white, walked over. The one in a black suit was Mika Kito. He had regained his usual calmness and rationality. However, when he talked to Hiroshi Kito, he always had a gentle smile on his face. The one in white casual clothes was Hiroshi Kito. After the emotional outburst just now, he looked much more normal. He even showed an expression of listening attentively. Sometimes he even smiled shyly, like a shy big boy. Hiroshi Kito saw Suzaku sitting on a rock and waiting for them. He waved his hand excitedly and smiled brightly. "Woo you." Suzaku jumped down from the rock and smiled. "Ayuen." Hiroshi Kito naturally took her hand and pouted. "Woo, you left for a long time. Why didn't you come to find me?" Suzaku's eyes darkened. She held his hand tightly. I'm sorry." He grinned. "It's okay. I forgive you." She also smiled. I'll cook for you tonight, okay?" "Wu Yu's cooking is the best. Brother, you have to try it." He turned to look at Mika Kito. Mika Kito was still not used to him recovering so quickly. However, he was more pleased. He ruffled his hair and smiled gently. "Okay, I'll listen to you." It was Mika Kito's first time seeing Suzuka cook. The open kitchen revealed how she looked when she was cooking. She was indeed very good at it. At least from her actions and outfit, she was. She was wearing a simple t-shirt and shorts. Her hair was tied into a bun on the top of her head. Her neat bangs covered her smooth forehead. She had an apron around her chest and was holding an egg whisk in her hand. She looked down and carefully whisked the eggs. Every time she went on a mission with him, she would always dress up coolly. This was the first time he saw her dressed like a girl next door. Mika Kito could not help but associate her current appearance with her ruthless expression when she killed someone. It was very strange and funny. He could not help but smile. Vermilion Bird suddenly raised her head and met his half-smile. She uncomfortably tugged at the corner of her lips and said indifferently, "Do you have a lot of free time?" He crossed his arms and said indifferently, "Indeed, I'm free." She lifted her chin and gestured with her eyes. "Since you're free, help me kill the fish in the sink." She had said it casually, thinking that a domineering and arrogant man like him would definitely reject her. However, she did not expect him to elegantly roll up his sleeves and walk to the kitchen. His handsome face was calm as he casually pulled out a sharp kitchen knife from the knife rack. With one hand on the fish, he neatly cut off the fish's head and skillfully dealt with the fish scales. His casual clothes made him look handsome and handsome. His face was like jade. At this moment, he was not as domineering and cold as he usually was. The soft light made his cold and handsome lines look slightly gentle, and she could see that he was a god. He had already dealt with the fish. He looked up slightly at Suzaku and smiled. "What are you thinking about? I've already whisked the eggs." She quickly looked away and stirred the eggs twice to hide her embarrassment. "Nothing. Where's Ayuan?" "He's upstairs watching a cartoon." Mika Kito carefully washed her hands and wiped them with a towel. "Is there anything else that I can help you with?" Suzaku put the whisked eggs on the kitchen counter. "No, I can do it alone. You can go upstairs and accompany Ayuan." "Okay, thank you." His voice was calm as he walked past her slowly. Hearing the sound of him going upstairs, Vermilion Bird's taut nerves suddenly relaxed, and she slowly exhaled a breath of air. She was puzzled by her own inexplicable reaction. Before, when he was cold to her, she had never felt any pressure. Why was it that when he was occasionally polite to her, she instead felt extremely oppressed? She shook her head to get rid of her wild thoughts and focused all her attention on tonight's dinner. She still remembered that Ayuan liked braised fish. She wanted to make braised fish for him. Oh yes, what kind of dishes did Mika Kito like? Her hands paused for a moment. She didn't seem to know what he liked. This question lingered in her mind. During dinner, she couldn't help but pay attention to Bei Tangshin's chopsticks. She wanted to see which dish he was pointing his chopsticks at the most. She looked at his expression and the look in his eyes, trying to guess if the saltiness of the dishes would suit his taste. Suzuka didn't realize how blatant her gaze was. Mika Kito suddenly put down his chopsticks and looked at her. "Suzaku, you've looked at me more than 10 times tonight. Do you have something to say to me?" Vermilion Bird's face flushed red. Mika Kito frowned slightly. "Just say it." Hiroshi Kitato tilted his head and looked at Suzaku curiously. "Woo, what's wrong with you? Your face is red. Do you have a fever?" "No." Suzaku put down her chopsticks and stood up abruptly. "I'm full. You guys take your time." She didn't look back and quickly walked upstairs. "Will you?" Hiroshi Kitato mumbled pitifully. "Brother, did I say something wrong?" Mika Kito glanced at Suzuku's back and turned to comfort Hiroshi Kitato. "No, it's nothing to do with you. She's probably in a bad mood." Hiroshi Kitato blinked curiously. Why is she in a bad mood? This question stumped Mika Kito. He massaged his temples and said helplessly, "I don't know either." Hiroshi Kitato nodded thoughtfully and suddenly grinned. "It's okay. I'll ask her upstairs later. She'll tell me everything." Mika Kito smiled. "Okay, let's eat first." Okay. He nodded heavily and picked up his favorite braised fish with his chopsticks and put it on Mika Kito's plate. He smiled as if he was presenting a treasure. "Brother, have some fish." "Good boy." Mika Kito ruffled his hair. This was a standalone villa. When they first arrived in Japan, Mika Kito had asked someone to move Suzaku's luggage to the guest room. She didn't raise any objections and the three of them began living together naturally. To make it easier for her to take care of Hiroshi Kitato, she lived next door to him. Mika Kito lived on the other side of Hiroshi Kitato's room. After the brothers finished eating, they rested in the living room for a while and then went upstairs together. Hiroshi Kitato refused to go back to his room and knocked on Suzaku's door. Vermilion Bird had just finished taking a bath. She was wrapped in a bathrobe, and her hair was still dripping wet. When she heard the knock on the door, she quickly changed into her home clothes with short sleeves and shorts. She wiped her hair with a towel before opening the door. When she saw Ayuan standing in front of her and Mika Kito behind him, she couldn't help but recall the embarrassing scene in the dining room. She coughed and said, "Ain, what's the matter?" Welfare Hongcha 866. Chapter 367. When Hiroshi Kitato saw her, he forgot his original motive. He pointed at her hair and said, "Your hair is still dripping. Woo, let me help you blow dry your hair." Suzaku smiled. "It's okay. I can do it myself." He did not give up. "I want to help you. You've done it for me so many times. I'll only do it for you this time." "All right then." She could not argue with him and could only give in. Hiroshi Kitato and Suzaku put their arms around each other's shoulders as they walked into the room. Poor Mika Kito was completely ignored by the two of them. He did not seem to care at all as he walked calmly into Suzaku's room. He closed the door and sat on the sofa leisurely as he watched Aon blow dry Suzaku's hair. "How is it? Does it hurt?" It was Hiroshi Kitato's first time doing such a thing. He did not dare to use too much strength as he was worried that he would tug on her hair and hurt her. He asked carefully. "It doesn't hurt at all. It's very comfortable." Suzaku lay comfortably on his lap as his slender fingers weaved through her hair gently. Under the light, the two of them looked very intimate and warm. Mika Kito looked at them from afar and was momentarily distracted. He seemed to see Bailey Han and Xia Dong through them. He suddenly felt a little bad. He stood up abruptly and left the room without a word. The door closed with a soft bang. Suzaku could not help but look up at the door. Hiroshi Kitato said, "Wuyu, is my brother angry?" Suzaku did not understand. "But because we were only focused on chatting among ourselves and neglected him." He frowned in frustration. Suzaku laughed. "Don't worry. He's not such a petty person." "Oh, you're right." The frustration only lasted for a moment. He smiled happily again and continued to blow dry her hair. The night sky was filled with stars. The night breeze brought along the fragrance of flowers. Mika Kito stood on the dark balcony, leaning against the railing, looking at the city's bright night scene. The sound of the glass door opening came from the room next door. Suzaku was wearing a spaghetti-strap nightgown and a shawl as she walked to the balcony. When Mika Kito looked up at her, she also saw him. She nodded as a greeting and then looked into the distance. Just like that, the two of them stood alone on their own balcony, enjoying the night view without disturbing each other. After an unknown period of time, Suzaku suddenly opened her mouth and broke the silence. "I want to bring a Yuan to visit Principal Lin. Principal Lin has always been thinking about a Yuan." "All right, I'll get Lu Xing to arrange it tomorrow." "Thank you. It's late. Rest early." "All right." The two of them said a simple goodnight and returned to their respective rooms. In the dark night, Suzaku lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. She felt a little annoyed. She felt that she had developed feelings for Mika Kito that she shouldn't have. If that wasn't the case, why would she pay attention to his preferences? If that wasn't the case, why would she blush when he caught her peeking at him at the dinner table? She was no longer an ignorant little girl. Although as an assassin she had always been taught not to be emotional, she still understood what she should understand. She patted her cheeks and warned herself that this man wasn't someone she could control. She had to quickly give up those thoughts. That's right, that's it. In the room next door, Hiroshi Kitato had already fallen asleep. However, he did not sleep well. His brows were tightly knitted together, and sweat appeared on his forehead. He hugged his arms tightly and curled himself into a ball. However, he was still so cold that he was shivering, and his teeth were clenched so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. He tried hard to open his eyes, but it was as if he was in a nightmare and couldn't open them. There was a layer of fog in his mind that shrouded his memories. He wanted to peel it open to see what was hidden behind it, but he couldn't do it. Suddenly, a pair of cold and malicious eyes appeared in the fog. That pair of eyes stared at him as if he was a prey. Then, strange scenes flashed before his eyes. He saw mutilated corpses or people, covered in blood, pouncing on him. Their faces were rotten and shriveled, their eye sockets were empty, and their hands were white as bones. It was as if they came from the 19th level of hell. Painful wails and the sound of a woman whipping the corpses penetrated his brain. He shook his head in pain and screamed, Don't come over, don't come over." Suddenly, the scene changed. He saw a young man in white standing in front of an iron door. A young girl in her teens opened the iron door and handed the young man a snack box. Then, the girl smiled shyly at the young man, and then, there was no more then. He was woken up. Hiroshi Kitato stared blankly at his anxious brother and Suzo, who was standing beside him with an equally anxious face. He asked blankly, "Brother, why are you in my room?" You scared me to death." Mika Kitato hugged his tear-stained brother tightly in his arms and whispered, "You had a nightmare," and screamed very loudly. He and Suzaku rushed into the room when they heard the screams. When he saw his brother's tear-stained face in his sleep, his heart ached. "Oh, I'm sorry to disturb your rest." Hiroshi Kitato was very obedient. "Silly boy, I'm your brother." Mika Kitato smiled and ruffled his hair. Hiroshi Kitato raised his head and looked at him expectantly. "Brother, I'm scared. Can I sleep with Wuyu?" Mika Kitato almost choked when he heard this. He paused and said, "How can that be? Suzaku is a girl. But I've slept with her before." He looked at Suzaku unwillingly. "Wuyu, am I right?" Suzaku coughed awkwardly. We were both children back then. We're all grown up now." He acted like a child and said shamelessly, "I don't care. I don't care. I want to sleep with Wuyu." Mika Kitato pinched his brows and tried to persuade him. "Ayun, brother will sleep with you." Ayun raised his legs and made a scene. "Wuyu is soft when I hug you. Brother's chest is hard. It's not comfortable." He said this naturally and innocently. There was no impurity in his clear eyes and his face was full of shamelessness. However, Mika Kitato and Suzaku felt awkward. Mika Kitato felt a headache coming on and wanted to persuade him. Suzaku pursed her lips and said, "I'll sleep with him." Mika Kitato disagreed. "That's not appropriate. It's okay. Ayun is just a child now." Suzaku smiled. Although Ayun was a year older than her, he was her younger brother and needed her love. Mika Kitato frowned slightly. His eyes were deep and his lips were pursed. No one knew what he was thinking. Suzaku smiled and shook her head. "It's okay. People like me have experienced everything. You should go and rest. I'll keep Ayun company." Mika Kitato frowned even deeper. He stood there motionlessly and looked at her as he comforted Ayun gently. "Ayun, I'll go back to my room to get a blanket and pillow. I'll be back soon." "Okay." Zhu Kei hugged the quilt and pillow and walked to the door of the room. She didn't expect that Bei Tangshen would be standing in the corridor, quietly staring at her with his deep eyes. She pursed her lips and lightly smiled. "What's wrong?" He seemed to be struggling for a long time before he said, "Although Ayun is my younger brother, I'll give you the right to teach him a lesson if he bullies you." Suzaku said seriously, "He won't." His expression was terrible and his voice was cold. "I know. I also believe in Ayun. I'm just saying what if." Of course, he believed that his younger brother wouldn't do anything to hurt her. However, Ayun was mentally unstable now and it was hard to guarantee that nothing would happen to him. She nodded. "Okay, I understand." Mika Kitato looked at her calm expression and felt a little frustrated. The bed was very big. When Ayun saw Suzuka walking over with a blanket and pillow, he immediately rolled his blanket to the side to make room for her. He patted the empty space and said, "Will you look? I've made a lot of space for you." "Thank you so much." Suzaku smiled as she laid out the pillow and blanket and lay down beside him. He turned to face her and looked at her curiously. "Wuyu, why does my brother call you Suzaku?" She smiled. "Because Suzaku is my other name." He pouted. "I think Wuyu sounds better." Wuyu, isn't that great?" Suzaku's expression froze. Director Lin had given her this name because of this meaning. However, Director Lin had never expected that she would walk the path of a killer. She quickly composed herself and smiled at him. "Ayun, do you still remember Director Lin? Director Lin of Chensi Orphanage?" Yuan's delicate brows furrowed. She thought very seriously for a moment and said, "Is it the Director Lin who gives us chocolate candies every week?" "Yes, that's her. Director Lin has always missed you. Let's go visit her tomorrow, okay?" He smiled happily. "Okay, Director Lin is a good person. We'll visit her tomorrow." She patted his head gently and smiled gently. "All right, it's late. Go to sleep. Sing for me." "Are you sure you want to hear me sing?" He nodded vigorously. Suzu had been a well-known tone-deaf child in the orphanage since she was young. Her singing could be said to be wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. There was once when the orphanage held a choir and she single-handedly changed the tune of everyone's singing. Because of this, she was mocked by the children for a whole month. She racked her brains for a long time and finally thought of a nursery rhyme. She hummed softly to him. Under the bridge in front of the door, a group of ducks swam past. Come and count them. 2, 4, 6, 7. Half of a yuan's head was buried in the blanket, and his eyes were closed as he dozed off. By the time she finished singing this completely out-of-tune nursery rhyme, he had already curled up into a ball, snuggled to her side, and fell asleep. Suzaku glanced at his sleeping posture and smiled. She reached out to turn off the bedside lamp. Awesome novel, Shinwoo 799. Chapter 368. Early in the morning, when Mika Kito opened the door to Hiroshi Kito's room, she saw the two of them huddled together under the blanket. The blanket had been kicked off the bed. Ian had his arms around Suzu's neck, his head resting on her shoulder, and his face pressed against her soft chest, sleeping soundly. Mika Kito was a little annoyed. She stood at the door for a moment, then retreated and closed the door. Good morning. Suzaku rubbed her sore neck as she walked downstairs. She greeted Mika Kito, who was sitting in the dining room having breakfast. Mika Kito was expressionless. He focused on the breakfast on his plate and ignored her greeting. Suzaku raised her eyebrows in surprise. She didn't seem to have angered him. Why was he emitting a dark aura that said, "I'm angry. Don't provoke me"? Good morning, Oni-san. Good morning, Wu. Hiroshi Kito tidied himself up and came downstairs happily in a white shirt and trousers. Mika Kito looked up at him and smiled. Good morning. Hiroshi Kito sat down beside Suzu. He propped his head with one hand and asked her, Wu, when did you leave? When I woke up, you were gone. 10 minutes before you woke up. Suzaku took the breakfast from the servant and placed one in front of him and the other in front of her. Ayuen, eat breakfast. We still have to go out after breakfast. Ayuen happily forked the fried egg with a fork. I know. We're going to see Director Lin. Although Director Lin was detained in Japan as a hostage, her life was actually very comfortable. Her living environment and conditions were many times better than when she was in China. She could enter and leave her residence freely, but she would be secretly followed by bodyguards. Beitang Shin arranged for her to live in the suburbs of Tokyo. She lived in a Japanese-style house. The house was full of flowers and plants, as well as several cherry trees. A maid took care of her daily life and was also responsible for secretly monitoring her movements. Every time Suzaku visited Director Lin, she would watch from outside the courtyard. She didn't dare to go in and face her because she felt that Director Lin was forced to leave her hometown because of her. She didn't have the face to see her. When she and Ayuen stepped into the courtyard, they saw a white-haired old lady bending over and watering the flowers. A fat cat was squatting by the old lady's feet. When the cat saw a stranger, it meowed twice as if to remind its owner. Vermilion Bird pursed her lips and called out softly, Dean. The old lady straightened up and pushed the reading glasses on the bridge of her nose. A kind smile appeared on her wrinkled face. Oh, it's Worryless. Come in and take a seat. Who is this person beside you? Suzaku smiled. Director, this is Liang Yuan. He's now called Hiroshi Kitado. He's Mika Kito's younger brother. Director Lin was startled. After a while, she reacted. Her eyes slowly reddened. She put down the watering can and grabbed Ayuen's hand tightly. I'm finally alive to see you. I thought I wouldn't be able to see you again in my lifetime. Director Lin's expression was very emotional. Ayuen was a little scared and struggled. Suzaku hurriedly said, Director, don't be so emotional. Something happened to Ayuen. She doesn't remember the past. Director Lin heard this and let go of Ayuen's hand. She smiled gently. Don't be afraid. Come and sit here. The three of them sat leisurely in the corridor of the front yard. The wind blew and the wind chimes hanging under the eaves made a crisp and pleasant sound. A servant brought a pot of flower tea. Suzaku took a sip of the tea. Director, are you used to living here? Director Lin smiled kindly. I'm used to it. It's pretty good. You're finally willing to come and see me. I'm very happy. Suzaku lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have left your hometown, Director Lin interrupted her. Don't think like that in the future. I don't have any relatives in China anyway. Living here, I don't have to worry about food and clothes. I'm actually very satisfied with someone taking care of me. You're just comforting me. Suzaku forced a smile. Director Lin's smile deepened. I'm telling the truth. Every day, I take care of flowers, I learn Japanese, and I play chess and poker with the old people around me. I'm very happy. You, on the other hand, don't always carry such a heavy burden. You're just like my daughter. I hope you're happy and don't have any worries. Suzaku's eyes were filled with tears, but a bright smile appeared on her face. I understand, Director. Director Lin nodded in relief. She looked at Ayuan and said with concern, How is Ayuan now? Suzaku looked at Ayuan, who was playing with the cat. She smiled and said, She's like a big child now. She's very innocent. That's pretty good. Some things are better forgotten. At noon, Director Lin personally cooked a sumptuous meal. The three of them were like a family. They sat around the dining table and chatted while eating. They recalled the interesting things in the past and laughed nonstop. After lunch, Ayuan sat in the living room and watched cartoons. Suzaku helped Director Lin clean up the dishes. When only the two of them were left in the kitchen, Suzaku said, Director, you've never asked about my job. Director Lin wiped the water stains on her hands and smiled gently. Although I don't know what you do, I believe that you won't do anything bad. Suzaku bit her lip and hesitated for a while. She said in a low voice, Maybe, I'm not like what you said, then I believe that you have your own reasons. There are many things in this world that can't be helped. You may be forced to make mistakes, but as long as you're willing to correct them, you're still you. Will you, in my heart, you'll always be that kind little girl. Director Lin looked gentle and wise. Suzaku's nose twitched, and her eyes were watery. I can't turn back anymore. From the moment she stepped on the road of being a killer, she had walked on a road of no return. There was no way to turn back. Director Lin hugged her gently and said softly, If you really can't turn back, at least don't do things that will hurt you. She was silent for a while. Then she softly said, Okay. Then she quietly wiped the corners of her eyes. It was already dusk when they said goodbye to Director Lin. The sunset was beautiful. They smiled and said goodbye. Suzaku's car had just driven out of the block when a white Toyota at the entrance of another courtyard slowly drove out and followed them from a distance. Ayuan had watched the promotional video of Disney on TV and clamored to go to Disney. Mika Kito had something important to do and couldn't accompany him, so he asked Suzaku to accompany him to Tokyo Disneyland. He also asked Lu Xing to follow him all the way to ensure Ayuan's safety. He didn't expect that something would happen. That afternoon, there was a parade at Disney. There were many tourists, and some staff members in cartoon costumes were taking photos with the tourists. Hiroshi Kitado's attention was attracted by a clown. The clown waved at him, and he left Suzaku and Lu Xing behind and walked toward the clown. Suzaku and Lu Xing were about to chase after him, but a group of tourists rushed over and blocked them. When they finally got through the crowd, Ayuan was nowhere to be seen. When Mika Kito received a call from Suzaku, he heard the woman's voice trembling. Ayuan is missing. Mika Kito immediately asked someone to retrieve the surveillance footage from Disney. It took more than 10 minutes to find Ayuan in the crowded square. He was standing in front of a man in a clown costume. They stood there for about 2 seconds, and then Ayuan followed the clown and left the square. Just as the Yamaguchi-gumi's people were urgently searching for Ayuan's whereabouts, Mika Kito received a call from an unknown number. Oni-san, Mika Kito's pupils shrank, and he clenched the phone tightly. Ayuan, where are you now? I don't know, Oni-san. The clown asked me to tell you that I'm with him. I'm safe. Don't be afraid. Oni-san will come and take you home soon. Are there any special buildings or scenery around you? No, this room is empty. There's nothing here. Oh, there's a light on the ceiling. Ah, don't take my phone. Give it back to me. Mika Kito's heart skipped a beat, and he said anxiously, Just then, an unknown voice entered his ears. Don't worry. Your silly brother is still safe. Mika Kito exuded a cold, murderous aura, and his voice was low and cold. What do you want? The man sneered. I want to deal with you. If you want your brother to be safe, Come and replace him. Mika Kito's eyes darkened. Tris, I'm not that stupid. I'll tell you the address so that you can bring people to deal with me. The man paused and said, I'll give you 1 hour to come to the Tokyo Tower. Don't bring anyone with you. Otherwise, I'll shoot your brother. After that, the man hung up the phone. Mika Kito looked up at Jiang Dao. Jiang Dao shook his head. There's too little time. I can't track down the specific location. Mika Kito took a pistol and put it on his waist. He said in a low voice, Jiang Dao, send people to the Tokyo Tower immediately and set up an ambush around it. After that, he strode out with Suza following closely behind him. He suddenly turned around and said in a low voice, You stay here. Suzaku said expressionlessly, No. I'm the one who caused a Yuan's disappearance. I have to bring him back. He said coldly, What's the use of you coming here? If you're discovered, you'll only harm a Yuan. I won't be discovered. He looked at her coldly. Stay here. Don't make me say it again. Suzaku clenched her fists and pursed her lips. She watched him walk out of the door. The Tokyo Tower was located on the west side of Shiba Park in the port area of Tokyo. Mika Kito drove his car to the Tokyo Tower. He stood by the roadside with a cold expression, like a stone statue. His deep eyes quietly observed the crowd around him. Suddenly, Mika Kito's phone rang again. The other party called him from another number. Get on the subway at Shiba Park Station in 10 minutes. Come and see. Songshu 566. Chapter 369. Mika Kito's eyes narrowed. He had to pass through security to get on the subway, so he had to give up his pistol. He rushed to the subway as fast as he could. After 2 stations, the other party called again. Get off. Wait at exit A. Mika Kito waited for nearly 2 minutes at exit A. A black Honda slowly drove up to him and opened the door from the inside. Get in, the person in the car said quickly in Japanese. After Mika Kito got into the car, the man in the back seat immediately scanned his body with a metal detector. When the detector slid to his waist, there was a beeping sound. The man said in a low voice, Take off your shirt. Bei Tangshan lifted up his clothes. There was nothing on his waist, only a belt with a metal buckle. The man was not at ease. He touched around the belt and did not find a dagger, pistol, or other weapons. He put the detector close to the belt buckle, and the DD sound rang again. It turned out to be a problem with the belt buckle. The man was relieved. After the detection, he did not find any weapons on him. He put away the detector, took out a syringe, and said, Now, please sleep for half an hour. Mika Kito glanced at him coldly. He rolled up his sleeves and extended his arm in front of him. The man injected the syringe and said, Aren't you afraid that it's poison? Mika Kito sneered. I'm still useful. Your master won't kill me for the time being. The syringe was slowly injected into his body. A strong sense of dizziness hit him. He leaned against the back of the chair and lost consciousness. Hey, wake up. After an unknown amount of time, someone forcefully slapped Bei Tangshan's face. His head was still a little dizzy, so he slowly opened his eyes. The dazzling light stung his eyes, so he quickly closed his eyes. After resting for 2 seconds, he opened them again. He was in a damp basement. There was a moldy smell in the air. There was a high-intensity incandescent lamp hanging from the ceiling. At this moment he was sitting on a chair. He could move his hands and feet freely. Beside him stood a bodyguard holding a pistol. The muzzle of the gun was pointed at his head. There was a long table in front of her, and a man was sitting across it. Mika Kito was no stranger to him. She pursed her lips and asked in a deep voice, Matsuda-tae, where is my brother? Matsuda-tae laughed out loud. I didn't expect the famous Yamaguchi-gumi leader to still remember a nobody like me. I'm really flattered. Mika Kito's eyes darkened. You kidnapped my brother to threaten me. Aren't you trying to take revenge on me? Just tell me what you want me to do. Matsuda-tae's handsome face was distorted with anger. He gritted his teeth and said, That's right, I did it to get back at you, Mika Kito. You destroyed my dream, and now you want to destroy the Matsuda group. I want you to pay me back tenfold. He clapped his hands, and the door to the basement was pushed open from the outside. A man in black walked in slowly with a weapon in his hand. He was threatening Hiroshi Kito. Oniai-chan. Hiroshi Kito was very excited when he saw Mika Kito. He quickly ran towards him. Mika Kito stood up and hugged Ayuen, who had rushed into his arms. He patted her shoulder and whispered, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." "Oniai-chan, they hit me." Ayuen pointed at her arm with tears in her eyes. "Let me take a look." Bei Tangshan carefully pulled up his sleeves. On his fair skin, there were bright red whip marks that were abnormally eye-catching. His eyes suddenly shrunk and shot out a cold light. "Ayuen, where else are you hurt?" "My back." Ayuen hid behind him. "Oniai-chan, I don't want to stay here. They're all bad people." "Don't be afraid. I'm here." Mika Kito carefully pulled her sleeve down and then pulled her behind him. She stared deeply at Matsuda. "I'll stay here. Let my brother go." A cunning smile appeared on Matsuda Taihei's face. He touched his chin and said awkwardly, "I can't. I'm deeply moved by your brotherly love, so I suddenly changed my mind. I want you to go down together." "Prison." When he said the last sentence, his eyes were cold and merciless. Mika Kito's expression was calm. "I knew you would go back on your words. Although Suzuki Chizukura is despicable, it would be even more tragic if the Matsuda group fell into the hands of a despicable person like you." "Shut up." Matsuda Taihei kicked over a chair and pulled out a pistol from his waist. He aimed it at Mika Kito's head. "You played the Matsuda group in the palm of your hand. You think you're so great, right? Today, I'll let you know that I'm the most powerful person. I'm the most suitable person to be the leader of the Matsuda group." Mika Kito glanced at him indifferently and curled her lips into a mocking smile. "I'm actually curious. Kidnapping my brother to threaten me. Was it your idea, or Suzuki Chizukura's? You seem to be too obedient to her." After Mika Kito interfered with the Matsuda group's leader election, she did not stop monitoring them. She had already planted her own spies in the gang. She heard that after Matsuda Taihei's dream of becoming the leader was shattered, he did not fall out with Suzuki Chizukura. Instead, he became closer to her. This made Mika Kito suspect that Matsuda Taihei was bewitched by Suzuki Chizukura. Bang! The bullet grazed Mika Kito's shoulder and flew into the wall. Matsuda Taihei roared angrily. "I told you to shut up. It's all your fault. If you didn't want to destroy the Matsuda group and cause a conflict between me and Suzuki Chizukura, I wouldn't have ended up like this. If the 5 elders didn't give him hope, he wouldn't have had the courage to fight for the leader position with Suzuki Chizukura. He wouldn't have ended up in such an awkward position in the gang and have to rely on that woman." Bei Tangshan's eyes moved slightly, and he raised his eyebrows thoughtfully. The bullet that brushed past his shoulder obviously didn't have any deterrent effect on him, but it was different for Ayuen. He seemed to have thought of something terrifying, and he shrank into a corner while trembling. He hugged his head with both hands and kept shouting, "Don't kill her, please don't kill her. If you want to kill me. She's innocent, she didn't do anything wrong, it's all my fault." As soon as Mika Kito touched his arm, he screamed and kicked his arms and legs to stop Mika Kito from getting close to him. His eyes were unfocused as he yelled, "You demon! Get away from me! You killed her! You killed her!" Mika Kito's mind worked quickly and quickly came to a conclusion. Ayuen was probably triggered by the gunshot and recalled the scene when Su Murong killed the mute girl. Mika Kito frowned, worried that she would trigger his emotions. She squatted a step away from him and comforted him softly. "And look at me. I'm your brother. It's all in the past. Don't be afraid." The 2 brothers, one was shivering in the corner and didn't let anyone get close to him. The other was squatting on the ground and comforting him gently, as if Matsuda Taihei didn't exist. Matsuda Taihei rolled his eyes and sneered. "Oh, I seem to have found something interesting. I heard that your brother was imprisoned in China for more than 10 years and lived like a dog. It seems like that's true." Mika Kito turned a deaf ear to his sarcasm and focused all her attention on Ayuen, trying to calm him down. Matsuda Taihei sneered. I have a way to cure his madness. Do you want to hear it? Mika Kito ignored his presence and said softly, I'm your brother. I won't hurt you. Don't be afraid. Damn it, I'm talking to you. Matsuda Taihei was furious that he was ignored. He kicked a Yuan at lightning speed. Beidingshin's eyes narrowed as he felt a swift and fierce kick coming at him. He abruptly stretched out his hand and tightly grabbed his opponent's calf as he coldly said, Do you believe that I won't break your calf bones? Damn it, let go of me or I'll shoot your brother in the head. Matsuda Taihei's face was pale from the pain. He waved his hand and signaled the bodyguard to aim the gun at a Yuan's head. Beidingshin's thin lips were tightly pursed as he stared at Matsuda Taihei with his cold eyes. If anything happens to A Yuan, I'll destroy the Matsuda group at all costs and let everyone be buried with my younger brother. You idiot, you've been used by Suzuki Chisakura, and you're still so smug about it. How pathetic. What do you mean? Matsuda Taihei ignored the pain in his leg and was distracted by his words. Mika Kito's other hand reached for her belt under her clothes and sneered. I never intended to destroy the Matsuda group. My target was only Suzuki Chisakura. The 5 elders were also pawns in my hands. I'm guessing that the 5 old men pushed all the blame to me in order to keep the peace, right? Matsuda Taihei's eyes flickered. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, Don't think that I'll believe you just because you said that. No matter what, you're the one who caused me to lose my position as the leader. Mika Kito curled her lips mockingly. I didn't cause you to become Suzuki Chisakura's lackey and obey her orders. Don't you understand that she won't put you in an important position? She's just using you to get rid of me. Matsuda Taihei's gaze loosened a little. He already had doubts about Chisakura Suzuki in his heart, but he quickly calmed down. The arrow had already been knocked, and he had no choice but to release it. Now that he had embarked on this path, he had no choice but to follow it to the end. He put the gun in his hand to Mika Kito's forehead and snorted. It's useless for you to say anything now. Don't worry, I'll let you and your brother have a good time before you die. Sasuke, bring them in. Mika Kito took out a 2-inch-long blade from under the metal belt buckle and hid it between his fingers. The blade was very thin and sharp, enough to slit a person's throat. He was confident that he could snatch Matsuda Taihei's gun and slit his throat in a second. However, he couldn't guarantee that he could stop the bodyguards from hurting a Yuan at the same time, especially when a Yuan was still in an abnormal state. Mika Kito could only look for another opportunity. Beauty novel, Hongcha 866. Chapter 370. The door suddenly opened, and Matsuda Taihei's subordinate, Sasuke, brought in 6 men. These men had the physique of sumo wrestlers, weighing at least 200 kilograms. They were naked from the waist up, and their lower bodies were covered with cloth. Their lower bodies were bulging, as if they were going to jump out of the cloth at any time. Their faces were flushed, and their eyes were filled with lust. They had lewd smiles on their faces, and they couldn't wait to walk over to Mika Kito and the others. Mika Kito's eyes turned cold. She had guessed Matsuda Taihei's intention, because he had ordered Jiang Dao to use this trick on old K before. Matsuda Taihei was so excited by the mountains of flesh in front of him that he forgot that his calf was still in Mika Kito's hands. His eyes were filled with fanaticism, and he shouted, In order to let you have more fun, I specially prepared a gift for you 2 brothers. It will be interesting to let you 2 brothers witness each other's lewd nature under a man's body. The guy named Sasuke slowly walked over with a syringe in his hand. The syringe was half filled with medicine. Needless to say, the syringe must be filled with powerful aphrodisiac. Matsuda Taihei suddenly thought of something and smiled wretchedly. Oh right, if these 6 sumo wrestlers can't satisfy you, you 2 brothers can satisfy each other. Mika Kito's fingers, which were hiding the blade, suddenly clenched. His body was filled with violence, but he didn't act rashly. Instead, he let Sasuke stab the syringe into his arm. The cold liquid slowly pressed down. Everyone's attention was on the syringe, including Matsuda Taihei. Very good, this is the moment. Mika Kito's hand that was holding Matsuda Taihei's calf suddenly pulled. Matsuda Taihei was caught off guard as his body heavily fell to the ground along with his pistol. Beitangshan kicked the pistol as far away as he could at the fastest speed. At the same time, he threw the blade with his other hand and ruthlessly cut the throat of the bodyguard guarding Ayuan. Blood flowed out as the bodyguard heavily fell to the ground. "Quick, catch Mika Kito!" Matsuda Taihei shouted as he lay on the ground. He crawled towards the gun that had fallen in the distance. The 6 brawny men were already impatient and rushed forward. Mika Kito kicked away Sasuke, who was injecting her with the potion, and pulled out the syringe from her arm. She quickly glanced around with her cold eyes and flew in front of Ain. There were still 8 enemies alive. In addition to the gun that Matsuda Taihei kicked away, Sasuke also had a gun. When Sasuke got up from the ground and pulled out the pistol from his waist, Mika Kito quickly dragged a chair and smashed it on his head. He rolled his eyes and fainted. The room was filled with the smell of blood, but the 6 men did not seem to notice it. They were already burning with lust, and their minds were filled with thoughts of how to push Mika Kito to the ground. Beitangshan pulled Ayuan and shuttled back and forth between the mountains of meat. Although the 6 people were fat, they were very agile and strong. Very soon, they smashed all the things in the room, such as tables and chairs, and chased after their prey. Mika Kito's dodging seemed random, but in fact, she was approaching the position of the pistol with Ayu. The moment Matsuda Taihei's right hand touched the pistol, Mika Kito stepped on his wrist and snatched the pistol from his hand. She raised her hand and shot the nearest brawny man to death. Bang! Bang! The gunshots came from the door. Suzuku and Jiang Dao were wearing black night clothes. Each of them had 2 pistols in their hands. They instantly killed the remaining brawny men. "Boss, sorry we're late." Jiang Dao strode over and pointed the pistol at Matsuda Taihei's head. "Boss, what about him?" "Don't kill me, don't kill me." Matsuda Taihei's right hand was stepped on by Mika Kito. He had no choice but to lie on the ground. Mika Kito increased the force of her foot and crushed his wrist. Crack! Matsuda Taihei's wrist was fractured, and he screamed in pain. Mika Kito stared at him coldly and said, "I've said before that I won't let anyone hurt her. If anyone dares to hurt her, there's only one outcome. Jiang Dao, I'll leave him to you. Clean him up and send his hands to Suzuki Chisakura. Tell her that if there's a next time, I won't give face to Xiao Bao." Understood. Jiang Dao pulled Matsuda Taihei up from the ground. Ignoring his pleas for mercy, Jiang Dao smashed the back of his head with the pistol, knocking him out, and dragged him out of the basement. Only Mika Kito, the 2 brothers, and Suzuku were left in the basement. The blood and gunshots constantly stimulated Ayuen's nerves. He was delirious, as if he had just been rescued from a dungeon. He shrank behind Mika Kito in a daze, not saying a word. Suzaku's heart ached when she saw him like this. She clenched her fists and approached him. I'm with you. I'm taking you home." Ayuen raised his head and stared at her blankly. After a long time, his long eyelashes fluttered, and sparkling tears rolled down from his eyes. "She's dead. Xiao Qing is dead. I killed her." Xiao Qing was the mute girl who was in love with Ayuen. She wanted to call the police to save Ayuen and the others, but she was discovered by the bodyguards. Su Murong killed her with her own hands, then had her head chopped off and thrown into Ayuen's room. Ayuen witnessed all of this at that time, so he had a mental breakdown. Today's shooting scene brought back all of his memories. He remembered all of his tragic past, and also remembered the tragic death of his lover. His mind was filled with dark and dirty memories. His face was pale and he was lifeless. He had lost all of his vitality. Suzaku's heart ached so much that she almost couldn't breathe. She hugged him tightly and said hoarsely, "It's not your fault. Xiao Qing loves you. She wants you to be happy. Ayuen, pull yourself together. You can do it." His thin shoulders trembled violently. He buried his head in her chest like a pitiful little animal, whimpering softly. He was so sad that he couldn't control himself. No matter what happens, you still have me and my brother. We will always, always be by your side." Suzaku patted his back gently and said softly, And do you still remember the promise we made when we were young? We promised to grow up together and see the outside world together. We could go see the cherry blossoms on Mount Fuji, listen to the music by the Seine River, enjoy the scenery of the lakes and mountains in Switzerland, and experience the scenery of the Sahara Desert. Her voice was slightly hoarse as she described the beautiful scenery in a soothing tone. Her eyes were filled with tears, but there was a warm smile on her lips. She was like the sun that dispelled the haze in the basement and ironed Yuen's cold and desperate heart. She also let Mika Kito see a different side of her. At this moment, she was no longer the cold killer Suzaku. She was just a very ordinary little girl who was looking forward to the future. Yuen had unknowingly stopped sobbing. He lifted his tear-stained face from her arms and smiled at her. In an instant, the room was filled with beauty. Mika Kito wanted to say something, but his body suddenly felt very uncomfortable. His whole body became boiling hot, as if he was being burned by high temperature. His abdomen was ignited with a ball of fire that was spewing towards a certain part of his body. He frowned and glanced at the syringe that he had thrown on the ground. Nearly a third of the liquid was gone, but it did not affect the efficacy of the syringe. Let's go back. As soon as he opened his mouth, he frowned because of his lustful voice. Suzaku had already noticed his abnormality and stepped forward. What's wrong with you? Your face is abnormally red. His heart was beating very fiercely in his chest, and his senses were even more sensitive. He even felt that the faint fragrance emitted from her body was very alluring, and her moist big eyes almost made him sink into them. Her slightly hoarse voice was also extremely charming, and her exquisite figure made his blood boil even more. Her entire body was emitting a fatal charm. Beitangshin knew that it was the effect of the medicine. He gritted his teeth and tried to control himself. Don't come near me. Inform Uncle Hanzo that they have injected me with an aphrodisiac. This basement was Matsuda Taihei's private residence. Suzaku called Jiang Dao in and helped Mika Kito to the room upstairs to wait for Miyamoto Hanzo to arrive. Mika Kito thought that he could rely on his own willpower to hold on until Miyamoto Hanzo arrived. He did not expect that although the drug took effect late, it was very effective. His situation was very dangerous. His whole face had turned purple. He was lying in the bathtub, soaking in cold water. His erect part was bulging and the veins on it were throbbing. No one dared to look directly at him. Outside the door, Suzaku lowered her voice and urged Miyamoto Hanzo. Uncle Hanzo, how much longer will it take for you to arrive? Miyamoto Hanzo sat in the back seat of the car. He did not look anxious at all. Hey, Xiaokei, it's very far from my house. It'll take at least half an hour. Suzaku could not help but roll her eyes. She gritted her teeth and said, when you arrive, you can only collect Mika Kito's corpse. Then I have no choice. I've already asked the driver to drive the car at the speed of a plane. Speaking of planes, I should have taken a helicopter just now. It would definitely be much faster. But the problem is that there are no landing points around. Suzaku's facial muscles twitched. This old man. Why was he still nagging at a time like this? She suppressed her anger and interrupted him. What do we do now? Other than cold water, is there any other way to relieve the pain? Of course there is. Miyamoto Hanzo blurted out. Xiaokei, as long as you sacrifice a little, you can save Oshin. An old man like me won't have to work so hard. The vermilion bird was slightly startled. Then, her face was filled with anger as she roared, damned old man, don't tell me you didn't rush with all your might because of this idea? Awesome novel, Song Shu 566. Chapter 371. How could that be? The old man is working very hard on his journey. That was close. This girl had almost seen through his plan. Miyamoto Hanzo patted his chest and said seriously, of course, there is another way. Jiang Dao can sacrifice himself. Suzaku was so angry that she almost threw her phone. Jiang Dao sacrificed himself? How could he say that? Even if Jiang Dao was willing, Mika Kito would kill Jiang Dao when he woke up. Of course, she couldn't sacrifice herself. But, when she quietly opened the bathroom door and found Mika Kito soaked in cold water, he was almost unconscious. Her firm belief started to waver. What concept of chastity? To her, it was like floating clouds, just a thin layer of film. If she gave it to him, then so be it. Just treat it as if she was pricked by a needle or bitten by a dog. Her trembling fingers fell on his bare skin, and as if he was struck by lightning, he suddenly trembled. His slightly closed eyes suddenly opened, and his originally dark eyes were already dyed with a layer of scarlet red from desire. His gaze was fierce, like a hungry beast that had found its prey. That dangerous gaze made Suzuka tremble uncontrollably. She subconsciously retracted her hand, but it was too late. He had completely lost his mind. He suddenly grabbed her right hand that was about to retract and pulled her into the huge bathtub. His muscular body pressed down on top of her. His continuous movements were too fast. Suzaku was no match for him. Moreover, she didn't even think of struggling. She was directly pressed into the bathtub. Her head was pressed into the cold water, and it was so uncomfortable that she almost suffocated. She waved her arms helplessly and held onto his neck. Using the strength of his body, she pulled her head out of the water. She opened her mouth and gasped for breath. Her beautiful eyes were watery and looked very lovable. The water slowly flowed down her beautiful neck and flowed over her towering softness. It aroused the desire of the man who was already burning with desire. Mika Kito's hot palm landed on her body and quickly tore all the clothes that were in the way into pieces. Rags were thrown all over the place, and soon, the two of them were naked. He had already lost his mind. Without any foreplay, he entered her body in the most direct manner. Her body felt like it was being torn apart. Suzaku groaned and bit her lips. The bright red blood slowly seeped into the water from where the two of them met. He was violently thrusting inside her body. Water splashed out of the bathtub and flowed everywhere. Her tears rolled down and her watery eyes stared blankly at a certain spot on the ceiling. She bit her lips and let out a painful moan. Perhaps it was because her current expression was too similar to a certain person, but Beitangshen's eyes gradually regained a trace of clarity. He slowed down his movements as he kneaded and ground with his hands. An unfamiliar feeling of soreness spread out from a certain place. Her mind gradually lost its clarity as she sank along with him like duckweed in the water. She didn't know how much time had passed. She was so tired that her body was limp, but he was still tirelessly teasing her. He dragged her from the bathtub to the bed. Their wet bodies were entwined together, moving up and down. She vaguely heard him holding her and calling a woman's name over and over again. It was the name of a woman he loved deeply. Under the dual effects of drugs and love, Mika Kito didn't wake up until the next afternoon. He found himself lying on an unfamiliar bed. He was wearing dry clothes and had been wiped clean. But as a grown man, he knew what had happened last night. Miyamoto Hanzo didn't make it. He had sex with a woman. Although he couldn't remember who that woman was, he could easily guess her identity because there was no other woman in this villa with him last night except for Suzaku. His brows furrowed tightly as he sat silently on the bed for a long time. Until there was a knock on the door. "Ashin, are you awake?" Mika Kito closed his eyes. After a while, he slowly opened them and said calmly, "Come in." Miyamoto Hanzo pushed the door open and entered. He was holding a glass of water and 2 pills. He walked to the bed with a smile on his face. "Ashin, this is the medicine to remove the remaining poison in your body. Quick, take it." Mika Kito took the pills expressionlessly. He drank a mouthful of water and swallowed them. "Where is Suzaku?" Miyamoto Hanzo coughed and chuckled. "That girl has already brought him back to the villa." Mika Kito pinched his forehead. Although it was hard to say, he still chose to ask. "Is she okay?" Miyamoto Hanzo shrugged. "To be honest, she's not very good. When I saw her today, I was shocked. Her face was as pale as a snowman and she wasn't in good spirits. This is the first time I've seen her so weak." Mika Kito's frown deepened. Although he couldn't remember clearly, he knew very well that under the influence of the strong aphrodisiac, he must have done something to hurt her. His mind was in a mess. Miyamoto Hanzo's medicine was very effective. On the way back to his villa, Mika Kito had already returned to normal. His mind was gradually clearing up and an idea was slowly forming in his mind. The sun was setting and the temperature outside was still very high. The cicadas in the trees were chirping, making people who couldn't bear the heat feel irritated. Suzuka sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and leaned lazily on the soft cushion. She held a book in her hand and slowly read the story in it. Ayuen sat opposite her. He held his head in his hands and looked at her quietly. As she read, her thoughts drifted somewhere and she suddenly stopped. She stared absent-mindedly at the densely packed words in the book. Wu Yu, Ayuen waved his hand in front of her and called her name. She suddenly came back to her senses and smiled. What's wrong? Ayuen looked at her worriedly. Wu Yu, you're a little strange today. Is there something on your mind? Ever since what happened last night, Ayuen had become much more normal. Although he hadn't completely let go of the past, he no longer refused to face it. His words and actions had also started to behave like an adult. Suzuka shook her head. Nothing. Ayuen pursed his lips and said seriously, since you don't want to say it, then I won't force you. However, I'm your friend. If you have any difficulties, you must tell me, okay? She smiled. Okay, I got it. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was Mika Kito's voice. Suzuka, let's talk. Suzuka's eyes flickered slightly, but she didn't answer. Ayuen smiled. It's brother. He seems to be looking for you. I'll go out first. He walked to the door and opened it. He saw Mika Kito standing at the door calmly. He smiled brightly. Brother, you're back. Suzuka is inside. You can go in. Mika Kito patted his shoulder. Only the two of them were left in the room. Mika Kito looked at the woman sitting opposite him. She looked normal and looked at him calmly. What do you want to talk about? He said calmly, take some time out. I'll go visit Director Lin with you. Suzuka looked at him in surprise. What are you doing? His eyes flickered slightly and his voice became gentle. I know that in your heart, Director Lin is your mother. Naturally, we should get her approval for our marriage. Suzuka's fingers dug into her palms. She suddenly burst out laughing. Mika Kito, are you serious? You can't take it? Let's just treat it as a one-night stand. We're both willing. Don't take it to heart. Mika Kito's eyes darkened. I'll take responsibility for what I've done, he said in a deep voice. She stood up in annoyance and glared at him condescendingly. I've said it before. I don't need you to take responsibility. Besides, I used to have many men. If all of them wanted to take responsibility for me, it wouldn't be your turn. He stood up abruptly, exuding a cold aura. His lips were pursed. Must you use such words to humiliate yourself? After spending so much time with her, he knew very well what kind of woman she was. Moreover, he had investigated her before and knew that she was very clean when it came to relationships. Suzuka snorted. That's my business. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Anyway, you just need to be clear about one thing. You don't need to take responsibility for me, and I won't marry you. She seemed to think that her words weren't harsh enough. She glared at him and said, even if you don't despise me, I'll despise you. I won't want a second-hand good like you. You, Mika Kito's anger swelled. He clenched his fists tightly and glared at her. After a while, his anger gradually subsided and he said calmly, do you think I'll change my mind just because you're trying to provoke me? Don't be naive. Suzuka pursed her lips and said coldly, even if I despise you, you won't mind? Mika Kito, you're too cheap. As soon as she said that, she felt a grip around her waist and was pulled into his arms. His arms were like iron pincers, confining her body tightly. His eyes were burning with anger and he had the urge to strangle her to death. I admit that there's someone else in my heart. But since I've decided to marry you, I'll try to forget it. You'd better not provoke me again. She stared into his eyes calmly and said indifferently, why? A marriage without love is painful for both parties. I don't love you. His deep eyes were turbulent. His thin lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything. He just slowly let go of her. Mika Kito opened the door. Miyamoto Hanzo, who had been eavesdropping at the door for a long time but didn't hear anything, quickly straightened up. He smiled and put his arm around Mika Kito's shoulder. He dragged him to the end of the corridor and said in a low voice, "Shen, how did your talk go?" Mika Kito's face was ashen. "Uncle Hanzo, you seem to be meddling too much." Miyamoto Hanzo's old face was full of smiles. "Aya, don't say that. The old man is very sad. Shen, after your father passed away, I've been worried about your personal problems. It's not easy to meet a good girl. Don't let her go." Welfare, Song Shu 566. Chapter 372. Mika Kito's face darkened, and it was obvious that he refused to answer. "Ayaya, don't be so cold. Just reveal a little." Mika Kito's face darkened even more, and the corners of his mouth twitched. "Uncle Hanzo, you're too free." Miyamoto Hanzo rolled his eyes, and his goatee perked up. "It's okay if you don't want to tell me. I'll ask Suzuki." Mika Kito pinched the space between his eyebrows and said helplessly, "I proposed marriage, but she rejected me." Why is that?" Hanzo Miyamoto rubbed his chin and looked at him from head to toe. "Apart from being a little cold and a little taciturn, you are full of shining points. Why did Koka reject your proposal?" Mika Kito's facial muscles twitched uncontrollably. Miyamoto Hanzo did not expect to get an answer from him. He patted him on the shoulder and encouraged him. "Ashin, girls need to be wooed. You have to treat Suzuka better and use a few more tricks to woo girls. You'll definitely win her over." Mika Kito did not take his words to heart. To Mika Kito, marrying Suzaku was just a responsibility. If she was really unwilling, he would not force her. Miyamoto Hanzo watched as Mika Kito's proud back disappeared down the stairs. He stroked his beard thoughtfully. It seemed like there was no hope for him to win over Suzaku with that blockhead Ashin. He still needed him to play the matchmaker. "Hee yuan. Miyamoto Hanzo smiled wretchedly as he sneaked into Hiroshi Kitato's room and patted him on the shoulder. Ayun was shocked. "Uncle Hanzo, why are you smiling so strangely?" Is it strange? I don't think so." That's not the point. The point is that Uncle has something to ask of you." Ayun asked him to sit down. "Oh, what's the matter?" Miyamoto Hanzo stared at Ayun. "Ayun, what do you think of Suzaku?" Ayun said seriously, "She's very good." Miyamoto Hanzo smiled like an old fox. "Do you have any objections if I make her your sister-in-law?" Ayuan's eyes widened. "You're saying to bring my brother and Worryless together?" He stretched out his left thumb and then stretched out his right thumb. "Bring the two of them together?" "Yes." Miyamoto Hanzo Mizazazazazaz? Hanzo sis. He and Wu Yu were good friends, but Wu Yu became his sister-in-law. It seemed a little strange. "What's strange?" Miyamoto Hanzo stared at him suspiciously. "Don't tell me you like Suzaku?" He quickly waved his hand. No, Wu Yu and I are just friends." "That's right." Miyamoto Hanzo patted his shoulder and said, Think about it. You and Wu Yu are good friends. If Wu Yu becomes your sister-in-law, she definitely won't mind that you and Shen have a close relationship. Then she won't cause any discord between you and Shen. But if Shen marries an ugly, fierce, and petty woman, she'll definitely mind that Shen treats you well and cause a lot of family conflicts. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Ayuan's frown deepened. He nodded and then shook his head. "It's not as exaggerated as you say, right?" Miyamoto Hanzo knocked on his head in exasperation. "Why not? Many TV dramas are like this. The older brother is too good to the younger brother and always helps the younger brother out, causing the sister-in-law to be unhappy and quarrel with each other. If Wu Yu becomes your sister-in-law, there won't be such a situation. What do you think? Think about it." Yuan. Ayuan couldn't stand his nagging. He clasped his hands together and said, "Okay, I understand. Uncle Hanzo, I agree." What a good child." Miyamoto Hanzo patted his shoulder and smiled mysteriously. Next, I'll need your help. Before dinner, Miyamoto Hanzo went back home. Only Mika Kito and the other two were left in the villa. After the maid prepared dinner, she invited the three of them downstairs to eat. Suzuka didn't have much of an appetite and didn't want to eat, but she was worried that it would cause unnecessary misunderstandings, so she changed her clothes and went downstairs. Mika Kito and Hiroshi Kitato were already sitting at the dining table. She greeted them and sat down at her seat. Ian smiled as he scooped a bowl of chicken soup and placed it in front of Suzaku. "Wu-you, you don't look too good today. Maybe it's because you were too tired yesterday. Drink more chicken soup to nourish yourself." The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener understood. Mika Kito's eyes moved. She tightened her grip on her chopsticks and her deep gaze fell on Suzaku. Suzaku quietly lowered her eyes and smiled. "Okay, thank you." She gently stirred the chicken soup and scooped a spoonful into her mouth. Her delicate lips curved slightly as she looked up and smiled at a. "It's delicious. Right? I specially asked the servant to make this for you." Ayuen's eyes sparkled with joy. He looked like an innocent child who gave his candy to his friend to make her happy. Suzuka's smile widened and her eyes sparkled. "I see. Thank you so much." Ayuen grinned. He scooped another bowl of soup and placed it in front of Mika Kito. He chuckled and said, "Brother, you were stabbed by a bad guy with a syringe when you tried to save me yesterday. It must be very painful. Drink some soup to nourish yourself." Mika Kito calmly retracted her gaze from Suzaku and smiled. "Will you eat this? It's delicious." "Will you, let me help you remove the fish bones," Ein served Suzaku with a bright smile. Suzaku reciprocated his courtesy by picking up food and scooping soup for him. Mika Kito saw their enthusiastic interaction. Ein suddenly leaned closer to Suzaku and stared at the corner of her mouth with his beautiful eyes. She was stunned. "What's wrong?" "It's nothing." He reached out to wipe the corner of her mouth and smiled. "There's something on it." She smiled. "Thank you." In her heart, she and Ayuen were good friends. It was nothing to be intimate with him. However, a certain someone didn't think that way. Before Ayuen recovered, Mika Kito wouldn't think too much about it. But now that Ayuen's mind was clear, even a fool could see how good and considerate he was to her. Mika Kito couldn't help but wonder if Ayuen had special feelings for Suzaku. For example, he liked her. Thinking of this possibility, he felt a little uncomfortable. After all, he had just had intimate contact with her last night. He was a little conflicted, and it was hard to explain why he was unhappy. Mika Kito put down his chopsticks and went upstairs without saying a word. Suzaku also put down her chopsticks. Ayuen glanced at Mika Kito's back as he left, and then glanced at Suzaku beside him. He frowned and sighed. "Wu-you, what do you think is wrong with my brother?" Suzaku said calmly, "He should be fine. He looks normal." Ayuen shook his head. "No, he's not normal. He didn't say a word tonight." His eyes lit up, and he stared at her mysteriously. He lowered his voice and said, "Wu-you, is my brother jealous?" "Jealous?" Suzaku was surprised. "Jealous of what? Jealous of who?" Ayuen touched her hair and sighed. "Silly, of course he's jealous of you. I'm guessing that my brother likes you." "Ayuen, are you talking in your sleep?" Suzaku couldn't help but laugh. She hadn't heard such a funny joke in a long time. Mika Kito liked her? Ayuen puffed up his cheeks and said sadly, "I'm telling the truth." Ju Kei retracted her smile, patted him on the shoulder, and said seriously, "Ayuan, your brother has someone he likes in his heart. Don't associate me with him in the future." Ayuen stared into her eyes. Do you like my brother?" Vermilion Bird faintly smiled. "I don't like it." "You're lying." Ayuen shouted unhappily. "My brother is so good. Why don't you like him?" Suzaku was amused by his childish words. "Ayuen, you're too young to understand relationships. I don't have to like someone just because he's good." Ayuen's face darkened. "I'm 1 year older than you. But your mental age is younger than mine." Suzaku didn't give him any face. Mika Kito noticed that Ayuen and Suzaku were getting closer and closer. He often saw the two of them snuggling on the sofa and watching cartoons. Both of them were hugging pillows and laughing like children. He suddenly realized that Suzaku looked very good when she smiled. Her eyes were beautiful to begin with. Every time she smiled, they would curve into crescent moons. There was a hint of charm in her innocence. When she was with Ayuan, she was casual and cheerful. However, in front of him, she still had a cold expression. This made him guess that she actually liked Ayuan. Ayuan liked her, and she liked Ayuan. The two of them were like an intimate couple. His existence seemed to be a little redundant. However, Ayuan didn't know that he and Suzaku had been intimate. If he knew, would he dislike her? Would she blame him as her elder brother? Mika Kito's brows furrowed into a chuan shape. He was getting more and more frustrated. Brother, Ayuan suddenly pushed open the door and interrupted his thoughts. What's wrong? Mika Kito saw that he was holding the skull in his hand. Ever since he regained his consciousness, he rarely saw him holding it. Ayuan sat on the fabric sofa opposite him and stroked the skull with his fingers. He seemed to have made a great decision. He bit his lips and said, I want Xiaoqing to be buried in peace. Only then could he truly let go. Mika Kito was very happy for him. The corners of his lips curled up. Okay, I'll arrange it. His clear eyes sparkled as he grinned. Thank you, brother. Only Xiaoqing's head was left. She was also buried in Qingshan's spirit garden. After Mika Kito and Suzaku bid farewell to her body, they left Ayuan some private space. The two of them walked one after the other under a cherry blossom tree. Mika Kito suddenly turned around and looked at Suzaku with a deep gaze. He said in a deep voice, Did you refuse to marry me because of Ayuan? Add, Song Shu 566. Chapter 373. Vermilion Bird was slightly taken aback. She glanced at Ayuan in the distance and said calmly, No. Mika Kito pursed his lips. Ayuan is very innocent. Don't let him get hurt. Don't tell him about us. Suzaku felt as though something had pricked her heart. She looked at him quietly. I've said it before. It has nothing to do with Ayuan. You don't have to worry that I'll lead him astray. Mika Kito looked upset. He didn't mean it that way. He only wanted to let her be with Ayuan, but he was afraid that Ayuan would mind their relationship. That was why he asked her to hide it from Ayuan. If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I'm taking the day off. She glanced at him and turned to leave. He suddenly said, Wait a minute. She turned to look at him. He pursed his lips. That's not what I meant. She looked calm. What? He was a little annoyed and frowned. Forget it. It's nothing. You can go. She nodded casually. Help me tell Ayuan. That night, Vermilion Bird returned home very late. A luxurious car drove her downstairs, and a handsome blonde man came down from the driver's seat and helped her out from the passenger seat. She was like a puddle of mud leaning on the handsome man's arms, with an intoxicated smile on her face. Mika Kito stood in front of the window on the second floor and watched coldly as the blonde man helped her press the doorbell. Then, he heard the sound of the servant welcoming Suzaku in. She heard the sound of stumbling footsteps and the servant's worried voice. Miss Suzaku, please be careful. There's a staircase here. Suzaku was tall, more than 1.7 meters. In comparison, the maid who was supporting her only reached her shoulders. The petite maid was tired and worried. She was afraid that Suzaku would fall down. It was not easy for her to help her to the corridor on the second floor. She was already sweating. The maid heaved a sigh of relief. She suddenly raised her head and saw a tall figure standing in the corridor. She hurriedly called out respectfully, Eldest young master. Mika Kito looked calmly at Suzaku, who reeked of alcohol. Suzaku's head was drooping and she was leaning on the maid. She looked very drunk. The maid could not bear the burden and was panting. He slowly approached them and grabbed Suzaku's arm. He abruptly pulled her away from the maid and into his arms. He said indifferently, I'll send her back to her room. You should go and rest. The maid bowed respectfully. Yes, young master. Good night. Suzaku was extremely disobedient. She moved her body and giggled foolishly. He did not know what she was mumbling. Mika Kito knew how much she could drink. She must have drunk a lot to be so drunk. There was an inexplicable anger in his heart. She was drunk and alone. Didn't she know that this was very dangerous? Who was the blonde man who sent her back just now? She staggered and almost fell. Fortunately, he held her slender waist firmly and pulled her up. She was pressed tightly against his chest. She looked up in confusion and mumbled incoherently, "For you." His face was ashen. He held her with one hand and pinched her chin with the other, forcing her to look directly at him. He squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "Take a good look at who I am." Her starry eyes were slightly open and her delicate brows were slightly furrowed. She looked like she was thinking hard. She smiled foolishly and said, "You're in." Mika Kito had the urge to throw her away. She wrapped her arms around his neck and pouted her red lips. She said pitifully, "I feel terrible. I feel terrible here." She pointed at her chest. "My head hurts too." Mika Kito's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He said angrily, "Who told you to drink so much? It would be strange if your head didn't hurt." He simply carried her up horizontally and threw her onto the bed. She rolled on the bed in a daze, her hands pulling at her clothes. She was wearing a V-neck black off-shoulder t-shirt and high-waisted jeans. Her t-shirt was lifted up by her, revealing the graceful lines of her waist. Her fair skin glowed with a healthy luster under the soft light. She took off her shirt and threw it off the bed. The black bra wrapped around her chest and her soft pink peaks were perky. Her cleavage was faintly discernible and her fullness was on the verge of bursting out. Mika Kito's face twitched uncontrollably. This damned woman. Did she think that he was dead? He quickly pulled up a thin blanket and covered her body. She frowned impatiently. Her fingers touched the zipper of her jeans and pulled it open. She moved her slender waist and took off her pants. She reached out from under the blanket and threw her pants off the bed. Her movements were too big. The blanket on her body was lifted to one side, revealing her fair and slender legs, her flat and tight stomach, and half of her black panties. Perhaps it was because of the alcohol, her whole body was hot. Her exposed skin felt the cold air of the air conditioner, and it was incomparably comfortable. She still felt that it was not enough, and threw the blanket covering her upper body to the side. Her right hand reached behind her back, and it seemed that she was going to unbutton her bra. Bei Tangshen was a little stunned. His face darkened even more. He quickly pulled the blanket over and covered her body again. "Let go. It's hot." Suzuka moved her body unconsciously. Her charming face had a languid and flirtatious look that was unique to drunk people. Mika Kito's body stiffened. A blurry image uncontrollably appeared in his mind. He was panting heavily and sweating profusely. The woman under him was moaning coquettishly like a puddle of spring water. His Adam's apple bobbed. Blood gushed down his throat. He wrapped her up like a dumpling with the blanket. His voice was slightly hoarse. "Stay still. Don't move. It's hot." Her starry eyes opened slightly. She looked at him blankly with her watery eyes and pursed her red lips. "I'm hot." His body tensed up and his deep eyes became even more serene, intertwining with something that no one could understand. He clenched his fists tightly and suddenly stood up. He strode out of her room and slammed the door shut. Standing in the empty corridor, he placed his right hand on his chest. His heart was beating rapidly in his chest. His eyes gradually regained clarity. He told himself that he was a normal man. It was normal for his blood to surge when he saw that scene. "Good morning." Suzuka rubbed her aching head and slowly walked down the stairs. The two people in the dining room looked up at her at the same time. Hiroshi Kito had a bright smile on his face. "Well, good morning." Mika Kito didn't look too good. He glanced at her indifferently, then lowered his eyes and focused on the breakfast on his plate. A faint fragrance wafted into her nose. She sat beside him. The maid placed her breakfast in front of her and placed a bowl of hangover soup. "Miss Suzaku, this is the hangover soup that second young master instructed me to make." Suzaku politely thanked her. Then she smiled at Ayuin, who looked concerned. Ayun asked, "Wu, why did you drink so much last night?" Mika Kito paused. He seemed to be waiting for her answer. Suzaku shrugged nonchalantly. "It's rare for me to have some free time, so I went to the bar to relax." Mika Kito asked indifferently, "Who was the man who sent you home last night?" Suzaku raised her eyebrows. "I don't remember." When she felt that she was drunk, she grabbed a man from the bar and asked him to send her home. She didn't know the man's name. Mika Kito's eyes flashed. His voice deepened. "How dare you sit in a stranger's car?" She looked at him in amusement. "Do you think anyone would dare to do anything to me?" He retorted sarcastically, "Who was the one who was drunk last night? Even if I sold you out, you wouldn't realize it." She said indifferently, "You don't have to worry about me." Bei Tangshan's fist had landed on cotton. He was so angry that he almost died. The fire in his heart was raging. He glared at her and gritted his teeth. "I'm your superior. I have the right to control you." She glanced at him indifferently. "Even if you're my superior, you can only control my work. You don't have the right to control my private life." She stood up and said slowly, "I don't think it's suitable for me to stay here anymore. I'll move out today." What was this? Was she drawing a line between herself and him so that she could pursue her private life? Mika Kito's deep eyes were like a storm. He clenched his fists so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands were throbbing. He said coldly, "From the moment you signed the agreement with me, you're my subordinate. You have to listen to my orders, whether it's for personal or private matters. I order you not to move out." Suzaku looked at him calmly with a trace of pity in her eyes, as though she was looking at an unreasonable child. Her red lips moved and she said indifferently, "If you want to use the agreement to bind me, I have nothing to say. Boss, I'm full. Do you have any orders for me now?" Deep down, she was an arrogant person. Even when she was forced to work for him, she had never used honorifics. But now, she was using honorifics to him. Mika Kito's cold gaze was like a sharp knife stabbing into her body. But she didn't feel anything. She stood a few meters away from him calmly and said slowly, "If you don't have any orders for me, I'll go upstairs first." She even bowed respectfully to him. Mika Kito was so angry that he threw the coffee cup beside him. The coffee cup rolled to her feet and the coffee spilled all over the floor. It even splashed onto her trousers. She didn't care at all. She bent down and picked up the coffee cup with a humble attitude. She walked a few steps forward and put it back on the table. She smiled faintly and turned to go upstairs. His expression became colder and colder. His gaze was fierce like a violent lion staring at its prey. He walked out of his territory step by step. Ayun carefully glanced at Mika Kito's ugly expression and said softly, "Oni-san, you look so scary right now." Bei Tangshan's body suddenly trembled. What was he doing? Towards subordinates who didn't listen to him, he would always directly kick them out of the Yamaguchi-gumi. There was no need for him to waste time getting angry with them. Why was he so angry now? He was crazy. Everything was messed up ever since that night. Damn it. Beauty novel, Song Shu 566. Chapter 374. Saturday morning. Before dawn, Mika Kito was woken up by knocking on the door. Hiroshi Kitato stood at the door with a huge backpack on his back. He grinned at him. "Brother, Wu, you and I are going camping in Hokkaido." Mika Kito frowned. "When did you decide?" Ayun clasped his hands together and looked apologetic. "Last night. I'm sorry, brother. Well, you said it was a little secret between us and she didn't want me to tell anyone else. That's why I can only tell you now." Mika Kito's face darkened. "Where is she now?" "She's already downstairs." "Brother, do you want to come with us?" Bei Tangshan furrowed his brows and looked at him with an unfathomable gaze before saying, "Go downstairs and have breakfast first." Ayun scratched his head and walked downstairs slowly like a little snail with a thick shell. 10 minutes later, Suzaku and Ayun finished their breakfast. They carried their luggage and were about to go out. Mika Kito was wearing casual clothes and carrying a huge suitcase as he walked downstairs. Suzaku instinctively looked at Ayuin. Ayuin covered her mouth with her right hand and blinked her beautiful eyes innocently. Mika Kito looked at them indifferently and said slowly, "Everything is ready. Let's go." Suzaku said indifferently, "I only booked 2 tickets." In other words, she didn't reserve a seat for him at all. Mika Kito said casually, "Cancel the tickets and take my private jet." Suzaku's expression didn't change. Spus. The calm expression on Beitang Shin's face cracked open. Ayuin took a sandwich from the dining table and put it in a food bag. She said with a smile, "Brother, I'll leave this for you to make breakfast on the way." Mika Kito smiled. "No need. I'm not hungry." Mika Kito's private jet was parked at Narita Airport. The cabin was luxuriously decorated and comfortable. Not long after the plane took off, Ayuin shouted that she wanted to catch up on sleep. She threw herself onto the soft and comfortable bed in the lounge and refused to get up. Suzaku and Mika Kito sat in the living room, each choosing their favorite sofa. One of them read newspapers and magazines to pass the time, while the other used the flight time to have a video conference with Jiang Dao and the others. A few hours later, the 3 of them arrived at Hokkaido. Hokkaido's summer was different from Tokyo's high temperature and dry heat. The climate was pleasant, and the cool breeze was gentle. It was very suitable for camping. The 3 of them rented 3 mountain bikes and rode them to visit the lakes and mountains of Hokkaido. The morning air was fresh with dew and the fragrance of wildflowers. A thin mist shrouded the forest like gauze. The green lake meandered quietly in the wilderness. Large patches of golden sunflowers bloomed all over the hillside. There were also many unknown wildflowers blooming on both sides of the road. Suzaku relaxed completely in this paradise. She welcomed the wind, bathed in the sunlight, and leisurely rode the bike. Her lips curved into a smile that came from the bottom of her heart. Ayuin rode the fastest. She walked in front alone. She turned around and shouted to them, "Brother, Wu Yu, the scenery in front is so beautiful. Hurry up and come over." Vermilion Bird smiled and said, "I'll be right there." She sped up and rode her bicycle past Beitang Shin. Beitang Shin inadvertently turned his head and saw her at this moment. Her entire body was bathed in the sunlight with a tranquil smile on her face. Her hair was tied up in a high ponytail, and her fair skin was flushed red from exercise. She was extremely youthful and beautiful. He seemed to see the shadow of another person on her body, and his gaze couldn't help but become deep and serene. They camped on the hillside by the lake. 3 tents were set up side by side on the lawn. Suzaku used the ingredients she brought and prepared a simple but delicious dinner. A bonfire was lit on the lawn, and the sky was dotted with stars. Ayuin and Suzaku sat in front of the fire and chatted. Mika Kito was on the phone in the distance, instructing Jiang Dao on something. When he came back from the phone call, he saw Ayuin whispering something in Suzaku's ear. Both of them had bright smiles on their faces. It was so dazzling that he found it dazzling. He wanted to stop, but he turned around and walked towards his tent. Outside the tent, Suzaku and Ayuin's happy laughter could be heard from time to time. Mika Kito pinched his eyebrows. He turned on the music and put on his headphones. Late at night, the 3 of them fell asleep one after another. Mika Kito was awakened by a shrill scream. He opened his eyes abruptly. It was Ayuin's voice. He quickly climbed out of his sleeping bag and ran towards Ayuin's tent. Suzaku also ran over. Her long hair was loose, and she was wearing shorts and short-sleeved pajamas. She looked anxious. Mika Kito opened his tent and turned on the light. He saw Ayuin in his sleeping bag, sweating profusely. His face was abnormally red, and his brows were furrowed. He was muttering something. "Ayuin, wake up." Mika Kito called his name in a low voice. Ayuin suddenly trembled and slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were full of pain. He stared blankly at Mika Kito and Suzu. His voice was hoarse. "Xiao Qing came to find me. She said it was all my fault. I killed her. She said the cemetery was cold and dark. She didn't want to stay there. Oniai-san, did I do something wrong? I should have been with her all the time." "Oh, listen to me." Mika Kito held his shoulders and stared into his eyes. She said solemnly, "You just had a nightmare. You didn't do anything wrong. Xiao Qing is a very kind girl. She won't blame you. She wants you to live a happy life and not live with guilt for the rest of your life. For Xiao Qing, the best thing is to be buried in peace. She should go where she belongs. Tears welled up in Yuan's eyes. His lips trembled a few times, and he threw himself into Mika Kito's arms and burst into tears. After a while, he wiped his tears and turned to Suzaku. I'm scared. I want to sleep with you. Okay. Suzaku answered without hesitation. Mika Kito's expression was gloomy. She said in a low voice, No. If you're scared, move into my tent. Yuan widened his eyes. I don't want to. I slept with Wu Yu last time. That's different. Mika Kito's face was gloomy. Yuan was delirious last time, but now, he was a normal man. I don't care. I want to sleep with Wu Yu. Wu Yu agreed. Yuan's stubborn temper rose. He was so stubborn that it gave people a headache. Mika Kito's eyes tightened, and said in a deep voice, You're no longer a child. Don't be willful. Yuan was startled and said with tears in her eyes, Brother, you actually yelled at me. Suzaku bit her lips, and finally couldn't hold it in. She stared at Mika Kito and said coldly, All right, stop blaming Even if we live in the same tent, we'll sleep in our own sleeping bags. You seem to be worrying too much. Her tone carried a trace of ridicule. Did he really think that if she liked Yuan, she would lead Yuan astray? Mika Kito's heart ignited with an unknown flame. Did she know the difference between men and women? Even if she acted like a man all day, she couldn't really live in the same room with a man, sleep in the same bed, and flirt with a man right under his nose, right? Mika Kito was furious. He wanted to throw this shameless woman into the lake to feed the fish. Brother, don't show such a scary expression. I'm scared. Yuan's eyes flickered, and she hid behind Suzaku. Mika Kito's face was ashen, and his sharp eyes glared fiercely at Suzaku. Do whatever you want. He left the two of them and crawled out of the tent, so that he wouldn't be angered to death by the two of them. Yuan and Suzaku looked at each other and fell silent. A few seconds later, Suzaku smiled. Wait a moment, I'll go get my sleeping bag. Okay. A few minutes later, the two of them were lying side by side. Their sleeping bags were next to each other, and their heads were leaning against each other. Yuan turned her head and looked at Suzaku, saying softly, Wu Yu, my brother was jealous just now. Suzaku pursed her lips. Don't talk nonsense. He can't wait to kill me. Yuan puffed her cheeks. If he's not jealous, then tell me, why is he so angry? Suzaku sighed. It's simple. He thinks that I like you, and he thinks that I'll lead you astray and steal you away from him. Yuan frowned. Didn't you tell him that we're just good friends? I told him, but he didn't believe me. Suzaku closed her eyes and didn't want to talk about it anymore. Let's go to sleep. We have to wake up early tomorrow. Yuan's brows were almost knitted into question marks. He felt that Suzaku's words made sense. However, Uncle Hanzo clearly said that his brother had feelings for Suzu. He had already done so many things, shouldn't his brother be jealous? The matters of the heart are so complicated, the occasional unhappiness didn't affect Suzaku much. The next morning, she still respectfully called Mika Kito boss, and greeted her with a good morning. Mika Kito looked as if he was frozen, and his whole body was emitting a cold aura. Suzaku didn't mind his cold face. She washed up, prepared breakfast, packed her luggage, and prepared for the next stop of the journey. Her and Yuan's trip was originally scheduled to take a week, but Mika Kito suddenly joined them, so they decided to shorten the trip to 5 days. On the 4th day, they stayed in a valley and ate food that they bought when they passed by a village. There were also 3 cans of beer. Everyone had a bottle. They sat by the campfire, ate grilled fish, drank beer, and listened to the sound of the stream in the valley. They were far away from the hustle and bustle of the city, far away from the bloodshed and killing. Everyone's body and mind were completely relaxed. Suzaku looked at the moon in the sky, her voice a little lonely. We're going back tomorrow. I suddenly feel a little reluctant. Yuan smiled brightly. It's okay. We can go out and play together often in the future. Suzaku smiled slightly, her eyes filled with warmth. Mika Kito drank silently, his face expressionless. No one knew what he was thinking. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Ayun went missing. To be exact, Ayun left Mika Kito and Suzaku alone on his bike. Moreover, he used a knife to cut the tires of their mountain bike, took their communication equipment, and left them in this remote valley. Come and see. Shinwoo 799. Chapter 375. Oniai-san, Wuyu, I'm very sorry for what I did, but I don't regret it at all. I know there are some misunderstandings between the two of you. Since there's no third party around, please resolve the misunderstanding. I'll be waiting for you at the airport in Hokkaido. You must come back safely. Ayun. Mika Kito's mouth twitched. He crumpled the note Ayun left for them into a ball and threw it into the trash bag. It seems like we can only walk out of here. Suzaku was checking the tires of the mountain bike to make sure that there was no way to repair them under the current conditions. Mika Kito glanced at Suzu, who was squatting in front of the mountain bike, and opened the map. It's 24 kilometers from here to the road outside the mountain. We can catch a bus on the road back to the county. Suzaku suddenly looked up and stared at him. Boss, did you bring money? Mika Kito's face darkened, and his eyes were filled with displeasure. Don't call me that again. Call me Mika Kito like before. She stood up and shrugged. That's not the point. The point is that I realized that Ayun took my wallet. Mika Kito's eyes flickered. He rummaged through the suitcase and sure enough, the wallet was gone. He was annoyed and amused at the same time. Little brat, you've planned this well. We're penniless now. Even if we walk out of this valley, we can't take a bus or buy food. After Vermilion Bird understood how serious the situation was, she didn't get angry, nor did she get irritated. Instead, she calmly packed her luggage. Mika Kito glanced at her and said indifferently, "There's always a way out. Let's get out of here first. There's always a way to solve the other problems. Simplify your luggage and throw away all the unnecessary things." The two of them threw their tents, sleeping bags, and other things into a cave so that they wouldn't pollute the environment. Anyway, they would be able to return to the county by the end of the day, and they wouldn't need these things anymore. After the reorganization, their luggage was very light when they returned. The two of them carried their luggage and set off on their journey. Birds chirped and flowers bloomed in the forest. They walked on the small path, but no one said a word. After walking for more than an hour, Mika Kito, who was walking in front, saw a mountain spring. She stopped and turned to look at Suza. After exercising, her face was flushed, like a beautiful apple. He said indifferently, "Are you thirsty? There's a spring up ahead." The spring water in the mountains was clean and clear, with a hint of sweetness. These days, they had been drinking mountain spring water. Suzaku put down her backpack and took out a stainless steel cup. "Boss, wait a minute. I'll go get some water." Mika Kito's eyes darkened. "I told you not to call me boss anymore." She looked at him steadily and smiled faintly. "But you're my boss." "You said that from the moment we signed the agreement, I'm your subordinate." Being attacked by her using his own words, Baitangshan felt a little irritated in his heart, but very quickly his mood calmed down. He reached out and took the cup from her hand and said indifferently, "Do you feel better now?" This woman was quite good at holding grudges. Suzaku was slightly stunned. She watched as he turned around and walked to the spring with the cup. He filled the cup with spring water, walked back to her, and handed the cup back to her. He was tall and slender. Although he was carrying a backpack and wearing casual clothes, it didn't diminish his handsome and domineering aura. His arm was raised very straight, and his slender fingers gripped the cup tightly. His expression was calm, as if this was how it should be. "What are you waiting for? Take it." She didn't take the cup, so Mika Kito stuffed the cup into her hand. She held the cup but didn't drink it. She pursed her dry lips and handed the cup back to him. "You drink first." He raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly. "You're not calling me boss anymore?" She bit her lip and glared at him in annoyance. "You drink first." He didn't take the cup and said seriously, "You drink first." I won't despise you. Vermilion Bird choked on his words, and her face turned slightly red. She tilted her head and drank half the cup in one breath. Then, she poured the water out of the cup and said, "Wait for me." She took the cup and ran back to the mountain spring. She refilled the spring water and handed it to him. He looked at her deeply, took the water and gulped it all down. They rested for a while before continuing on their journey. Before they left, they took another cup of water in case they needed it. Soon it was noon. They weren't very tired since they were both physically strong, but they were hungry. They were about 2 kilometers away from the highway. The hillside was filled with fruit trees. The apples and pears were already ripe, and the tempting fruits were hanging on the treetops, giving off a fragrant smell. Suzaku and Mikakito looked at the fruit garden at the same time. The two of them looked at each other, exchanging a message with their eyes. There was no one in the fruit garden. Suzaku coughed. "Do you want to go or should I go?" Mikakito said slowly, "Of course you want to go. It'll be embarrassing if I get caught." Suzaku's mouth twitched. "It'll be embarrassing if I get caught too." He looked at her seriously. "I'm a man. I have to care about my reputation." He just didn't want to go. Why did he have to come up with so many excuses? Suzaku complained in her heart. She put down her backpack and placed it beside his feet. "Help me look after my things." She was wearing a checkered shirt and jeans. For convenience, she had tied the hem of her shirt up, making her waist look especially defined. She rolled up her sleeves and was about to jump over the fence when Mikakito suddenly grabbed her wrist and pursed his lips. "Let me go." Suzaku was a little surprised. She couldn't understand why he suddenly changed his mind. He jumped into the apple orchard suavely and picked the big red apples. Suddenly, they heard a dog barking. A black wolfhound pounced towards Mikakito. Behind the wolfhound was an old farmer carrying farming tools. Suzaku heard the dog barking and her heart was in her throat. She stood on her tiptoes and watched for a few seconds. Suddenly, she saw Mikakito walking over with an old farmer. He was carrying a few apples and a huge wolfhound was following behind him. Suzaku knew that he had been caught by the owner of the fruit garden. She supported her forehead with one hand and tried to think of a solution. She lowered her eyes and saw the watch on her wrist. She quickly took it off. Mikakito looked humble as he bowed to the old farmer. "I'm sorry. Please forgive my actions. I'll compensate you." The old farmer looked unhappy. "You young people don't understand the hard work of fruit farmers at all." Mikakito bowed again. "I'm sorry. I'm very sorry." Suzaku grabbed his arm and pulled him up. She smiled at the old man and said, "Uncle, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. I like to eat sour food recently. When I see apples, I'm sorry. I asked him to do that. We don't have any cash on us. Can I give you this watch as compensation?" She held the watch with both hands and presented it to the old man. The old man's expression softened slightly. He sighed and said, "It's not that I don't want to part with those fruits. It's just that there have been too many thieves recently. It's just a few apples. Take it. There's no need for compensation." Suzaku quickly bowed and thanked him with a smile. The old man seemed to have thought of something. He looked at her from head to toe and said, "Miss, you like to eat sour food recently?" Suzaku nodded. "I don't know why. I used to hate sour food the most," the old man smiled. "When my wife was pregnant with my son, she liked to eat sour food too. I guess you're going to be parents soon." Mikakito's eyes narrowed and his fingers clenched into fists. Suzaku widened her eyes in surprise and stammered, "No, no way." The old man laughed heartily. "You youngsters are really careless." Suzaku seemed to be shocked for a moment. She smiled awkwardly. "No wonder my appetite seems to have increased recently." The old man looked serious. "You can't let the child starve. Have you eaten? If you don't mind, you can come to my house for lunch." Suzaku said gratefully, "Uncle, thank you so much. Hubby, we have food to eat." Mikakito froze. Although he knew that she was putting on an act, he still felt special when she called him hubby. The old man's wife had already prepared lunch. Since there were 2 guests in the house, she hurriedly cooked 2 dishes. She was so enthusiastic that Suzuka felt guilty. She felt that she had deceived a kind person. When they bid farewell to the old couple, Suzuka left her watch on the dining table when they weren't paying attention. The old man personally walked them to the path leading to the highway and reminded them to be careful on the way. As far as the eye could see, there were only the two of them on the field. Bei Tangshan suddenly stopped, turned his head, and stared straight into the vermilion bird's eyes, and said in a deep voice, "What you said just now, is it true?" Suzuka paused. "What is it?" Mika Kito's tone became heavier. "About the pregnancy," she said calmly. "Of course it's not true. I just want to cheat a meal for us." His eyes were filled with suspicion. "Are you sure?" She frowned. "Of course I'm sure. I've taken the morning after pill. I promise I won't cause you any trouble." His thin lips pursed and his face was expressionless. "You better be." He wasn't ready to be a father yet. Moreover, if the child was conceived under such circumstances, no one could say for sure if there would be any defects under the influence of the drug. Unfortunately, before he could finish his sentence, Suzuka misunderstood him again. She thought that he didn't want her to get pregnant at all. Her eyes darkened and she said calmly, "Let's not talk about such things that will never happen." She walked past him and quickened her pace. Her seemingly thin shoulders were carrying a big bag, and her back was straight and magnanimous. She exuded an air of arrogance that refused to admit defeat. There were very few cars on the highway. It took almost 10 minutes for a private car to arrive. Mika Kito raised his hand to signal to the driver, but the driver ignored him and sped past him. His face was as dark as the bottom of a pot that had been burning for decades. Ad, Shinwoo 799. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.